The meeting of the Executive Committee of 25th June 2025. We have present in the meeting Councillors Allison, Anderson, Brown, Carmichael. We have apologies from Councillor Chalmers and Councillor Johnson-Dempsey substituting. We have present Councillors Clark, Convery, Cooper, Cowan, Devlin, Fagan. We have apologies from Councillor Ferguson-Miller, Councillor McDougall substituting. I'll just check if Councillor Frame is in the meeting. We don't have Councillor Frame in the meeting. We have apologies from Councillor Keat and Councillor Handybody substituting. We have present Councillor Kerr, and I'll just check Councillor Lambie's in the meeting. We don't have Councillor Lambie. We have present Councillors Logan, Loudon, McAllen, McClymont, Leslie MacDonald. We have apologies from Councillor McLachlan and Councillor Cowie substituting. We have apologies from Councillor Nelson and Councillor Hosey substituting. Apologies from Councillor Ray and Councillor McGeever substituting. And we have present Councillors Razak, Robb, Ross, Shearer and Walker, and I'll hand back to the Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. At the outset of the meeting, can I say I've requested just about an hour and a half ago a request for urgent business relating to the issue of school transport. I will not be accepting the item of urgent business as I do not consider it to be urgent because the councillors concerned had ample opportunity to raise a motion to the council, and following a request from the convener of the Education Committee, I've agreed that a briefing will be circulated to all members this week. Come now to item 1, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? We have Councillor Loudon.
Thank you very much. It was actually a point of order, Chair.
Okay.
Okay. The whole point of us trying to raise an item of urgent business today is that there's been a material change in circumstances since the agenda for this meeting was produced, let alone for full council. And this is because that last week First Bus have announced the withdrawal of the number 65 bus service, which has been named as an alternative means of travelling to schools for many of the pupils who are losing their service in August. Parents and carers and families are needing to know urgently whether the council has had any engagement with First Bus on the withdrawal of this service, and if not, is it going to resolve to do so as a matter of urgency? And also, it's not clear whether or not families have been notified that this service is withdrawn, and if so, is the council going to resolve to do that as a matter of urgency, well ahead of schools returning in August?
Right, I'm going to come to Ian Strachan to deal with the point of order. But from my point of view, I don't want to stray into the realm of debate. Nonetheless, the SPT and a number of councillors are already actively pursuing First Bus and SPT on this issue. Ian, is there anything in there in terms of standing orders?
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, obviously, our point of order is about concern over an alleged procedural irregularity. Whether or not to accept an item of urgent business is entirely your discretion, Chair. So I'm not. I don't have a concern about a procedural irregularity.
Thank you very much. I'll return to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
Chair, could I have a second point of order, please?
If it is a point of order, I will take a point of order.
Thank you. Did the interim chair of education, as he intimated that he would at the last meeting of the Education Committee, make the council leader aware of our request to include school transport as an agenda item on today's meeting? And if so, why has that request been declined?
I've already dealt with that, and that is not a point of order. Councillor Johnson-Dempsey.
Yes, not a declaration of interest, a transparency statement. I am a regular volunteer with Bothwell Futures, who are listed on the Local Action Fund item. I don't believe it amounts to an interest.
Thank you very much. And can I come to Councillor Devlin?
Same. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no other declarations of interest. Can I come now to item 1, which is the minutes of the previous meeting? Are there any questions on the minutes of the previous meeting? I'm not seeing any questions. Can we agree those as a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. Can I come now to item 3, which is the Revenue Budget Year-End Report for 24-25, and can I invite Jackie Taylor to speak to the report? Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. This is the first of a run of reports that close off our revenue capital budgets for the year and introduce our new year monitoring for both of those. Members are already cited on the probable outturn exercise from earlier in the year that we reported to committee that included our expectations for our year-end position and approved transfers to reserves. This report will conclude the position for the year. If you take to section 4 of the report on page 14, we're summarising our year-end position and we're showing an underspend of £548,000. Table 1 of the report summarises the reasons for that over the 4 main areas detailed in that table. You can see that the marginal movements from what we reported at our probable outturn, the main item being corporate items, which is the third line on that table, with more explanation provided at section 4.9 of the report, that the majority of that underspend relates to movements in our bad debt provision. This is the position after transfers to reserves, and I'll pick that up later within the report. I would highlight that from sections 4.4 onwards in the report, there's a bit more information for members on each of those specific areas of budget that we've identified in Table 1. I would highlight at section 4.5 within the resources position within community and enterprise resources. The year-end position includes £700,000 in relation to an underspend on utility costs in relation to South Lanarkshire leisure and culture venues. These are paid for by the council, and it is proposed as part of our recommendations that that underspend is returned to leisure for use in future years' budget strategies. Also highlighting at 4.7 that within housing and technical resources, the year-end position includes £170,000 commitment in relation to an element of budget that's delegated to the IGB for scheme of assistance. Again, in our recommendations, we're proposing that the IGB retains those monies within their reserves. I'd also highlight at 4.10 on page 16 in relation to service concessions. Members may remember this is in relation to a change in accounting treatment that we apply, and we've reported and had agreement through committees that we will use our service concessions benefit to contribute towards budgets in future years. Since we have reported to committee, it's anticipated that the estimated savings will be available earlier, and therefore we are reporting an underspend in that area this year of £4.4 million, and we're proposing that set aside to assist in managing the risk of pay awards. I will cover that in more detail in later papers to this committee that members will have already seen in relation to our budget expectations. At 4.13, picking up on insurance fund, costs for insurance have risen, and we are seeing higher policy costs, costs in relation to storms and also historic liabilities that the council has to pay for. Therefore, we are proposing that underspends from empty property relief that's covered in 4.15 and 4.16 is transferred to the insurance fund to meet these costs going forward. 4.19 of the report on page 17 picks up our transfers to reserves. We do include within Appendix 3 of the report transfers to reserves that committee has already agreed, and also propose additional transfers to reserves in Appendix 4. They pick up on some of the items that I've explicitly referred to already in this paper. Taking you now to 4.21, this is the resultant underspend that I mentioned earlier, the £548,000 underspend, and the proposal for that. We are proposing that £40,000 of this be set aside to support the continuation of Winter Wishes strategy that sits within children and families. This helps care experienced young people by providing additional support, including financial support. The balance of £508,000 we're suggesting is set aside to assist in managing that risk of pay award being greater than the amount that we have within our budget. Section 5 of the report on page 17 picks up the housing revenue account position, and we are reporting a break-even position for the year. If I take you back to the recommendations, they're shown in section 2 of the report on page 13. There are a number of recommendations detailed there, including noting the position for the year and some of the suggested transfers to reserves that I mentioned within the report. I wouldn't propose to repeat all of the recommendations, but I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions? Could you please indicate now, and could I come to Leslie MacDonald?
Thanks, Chair. Can I take you to section 4.5, please, in the report? And I wish to support South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture's retain their £700,000 benefit. apologise for my voice, ensuring that the board manages all their budget pressures. Combined with the benefits of 13 million Leisure and Culture Transformation Fund, the future outlook for leisure and culture is much more positive. In addition, section 4.6 and 4.7, which relates to an underspend in the IGB, which is as proposed are retained for health and social care services. I want to support that recommendation as well, meaning it means almost £1 million can be retained within the IGB budget to help them manage the budget pressures that they are facing. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. It was to welcome that we're removing money from the council tax for the second homes into the HRA. I think that's a good thing, something Greens have worked on nationally, and in a housing emergency, housing needs all the investment it can. I also wanted to make a comment and ask a question on page 16, noting the massive increase in insurance due to the extreme weather events. This is the cost of climate change already locked in, and the cost of political inaction on this issue. And it's a warning. Every reduction in CO2 emissions from now on matters. This is the cost of not acting. It far outweighs the cost of acting. My question is about the final £500,000 from the HRA that's contributing to the insurance costs. While it's necessary, will this mean that the HRA has got less money to do its other good work? And another question is about, can we recover any of these costs from the Bellwyn scheme? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, do you want to pick that one up?
Thank you. In relation to the contribution from the HRA, these are costs in relation to our council house estate, so it is right and proper that the HRA contribute towards that. They have managed that within their position for the year. So that is within that break-even position that I reported earlier. In relation to the Bellwyn scheme, we had registered an interest in the Bellwyn scheme, as we would always do when that is made active. There is a threshold that the Bellwyn scheme applies, that our costs have to be above that threshold before any additional funds would be released. And we haven't received any additional funds from the Bellwyn scheme because we haven't reached that threshold.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? I think at a previous meeting, I'd asked for an estimate of the costs of the storms to council services, and it was just to ask what that would be, if you've given an estimate already to the Bellwyn scheme. Thanks.
Right. We're still collating the costs because they do relate to repairs that are obviously ongoing. The Bellwyn scheme threshold is around £1.7 million, so it hasn't exceeded £1.7 million.
Will we get a paper on a report on the costs that once they've come in?
What I can commit to do is, once we have a final position on the overall costs, I can share that with members.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was an undertaking sort of given previously. Can I maybe just, and apologies to those who have got questions there, can I maybe just follow up? I take it is there an issue here in that there are certain costs that we're going to have to bear as a local authority that we would not be able to reclaim then from Bellwyn? Is there a specific criteria around Bellwyn that means there are certain costs we're going to end up bearing as a result of this that we wouldn't be able to charge against the scheme?
There are costs that we would incur from any event that are self-insured, or where we have insurance in place, but that insurance doesn't perhaps pay for 100% of those. Any insured costs Bellwyn wouldn't cover. The reason that we're not getting money from Bellwyn is that our costs that we're incurring haven't exceeded the threshold. The Bellwyn's there for significant events and to provide some financial support for those which just haven't breached that threshold.
No, thanks for that. So I think it might then be useful in that future report to just make that clear. Okay. Apologies to those who were waiting. Can I come to Councillor Ross?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I'd like to thank Jackie for her report. Can I ask a question? If today's transfer of funds are agreed, would it be possible to furnish us with the amount we have in uncommitted funds in our reserves? I'm not looking for that today, Jackie, but if it would be possible to furnish councillors with an amount once you know exactly what we have in uncommitted reserves. Thanks very much.
Yeah. In terms of the proposals from today's meeting, there's nothing that's being added to uncommitted reserves. The balance of our uncommitted reserves is £13 million. In a later paper, I do refer to a reserves report that we took to our Finance and Corporate Committee last year, and we're committing to doing that again after the summer. So as soon as that paper is prepared, I'll be happy to share it with all members. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Jackie, back on insurance, but not Storm Erwin. The future costs that you're anticipating, I assume, are to do with the child abuse case. Have we a figure in mind that we're holding to cover for these, or is it an open door at the moment?
You're correct. The historic cases that I mentioned are in relation to that. We work with Glasgow Council and other neighbouring authorities around claims, because obviously some of them predate the council structure that we have just now. I don't have a figure on how much they will be. We get annual estimates for that, and that's what we're factoring into our projections around insurance costs. What we have built in so far is reflected in the ask for us to set some monies aside.
Okay. Right, I don't see any other questions, so can I bring us back to the recommendations in the report? Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. Can I come now to item 4, which is moving to the next financial year. This is a revenue budget monitoring report, and back to you, Jackie.
Thank you very much. So this is our New Year Revenue Budget Report. This has taken us to the 16th of May this year. We are very early in the financial year. We are projecting an outturn position for the year of break-even for our general services. From the bottom of page 27, there is a bit of tidying up of our budget to reflect the time frame for spend. That includes investment monies that were added to the budget in February this year. We do detail at section 4.4 that members will recall that there was some money set aside for borrowing costs to allow the investment pot to be carried out. The timing of spend means that no borrowing is expected to be incurred this year in relation to that. Therefore, £3.5 million of revenue budget for loan charges we expect to be available. And we are again suggesting that that's set aside to help with that risk of pay awards. We're also reflecting the agreed approach around our loans fund review and making sure that the monies that we are setting aside for future budget strategies are reflected within our budget this year. Confirmation at 4.6 of our employees' national insurance contribution funding that we received, that was already anticipated in our budget. And also, again, referring at 4.7 to children and families' budget pressures that we are helping manage this year through some unrequired budget as a result of reduced pension contributions. Top of page 29, in reference to teacher numbers that I've reported to committee over recent months. Scottish Government have recently written to the Council to suggest that the mitigations that we have proposed for our reduction in teacher numbers has not yet been accepted. This continues to be discussed with the Scottish Government, with 2 further meetings taking place over the last couple of weeks. I do expect to hear something, hopefully, over the next week around that. And also on page 29, at 4.12, again, just another reference to pay award. Members may be aware that an offer has now been made for local government staff over a 2-year period. If that is accepted, we would require to reflect the implications of that within our budget in 25-26 and beyond. That will add pressures to the budget position, and the one-off funding that I've referred to in this paper and the previous paper will help us manage the impact of that over time. If I take you back to the recommendations at section 2 of the report, we are asking that the break-even position for the general fund and actual spend is noted, that the transfers to reserves be approved, and also that the position on the HRA account that's detailed in the report of break-even is also noted. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to John Ross?
Yes, thanks, Chair. My question relates to paragraph 4.6. Given that we now have clarity on the impact of the employer's NIC contributions on the Council, Do we have any further clarity on what this means for our third sector charitable organisations and SLLC in particular?
Sticking to the tram lines of the report, Jackie, can I come back to you to answer that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this is something that we've picked up before. I don't have absolute costs for our third sector partners. That will depend on each of their own circumstances. In relation to leisure, we had provided an estimate before that they have built into their budget, and they've included that within their budget for the year. I can get that figure for you again if that helps.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, and can I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I wanted just to make an observation, if I may, on the teacher numbers at 410. It really repeats an observation I've made before, but it is really quite ludicrous that well into the financial year, we're still in a position that no less than £4.2 million of resource, which we can make good use of, is under dispute with the Scottish Government. I don't really understand how they expect councils to make prudential and sensible financial arrangements in a position like this on something relatively straightforward, which has been lurking about in the environs of these disputes for something like 2 or 3 years now. It is actually quite ludicrous we're still arguing about this teacher number thing. I appreciate we're going to get some response hopefully next week. I'm not sure that I have total confidence that will be a final resolution of the whole matter, but we look forward to that, obviously.
Thank you very much, and I'll just inform the committee that I have raised that issue directly with the First Minister. Okay, are there any other questions on that report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. We're agreed. I will come now to item 5, which is a capital budget monitoring a final outturn on the 24-25 financial year. Back to you, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. So, as Chair says, this is our capital report for last year. In the background section, reminding members that the capital programme for general services was £69.8 million. Housing was 77.2, so sizable capital programmes over the last year. Section 5 picks up the expenditure that we incurred on general services, £54.6 million. The element of the budget that remains unspent will carry forward into the new financial year to reflect the timing of projects completing. We'll pick that up as part of the next report as well. The main projects that relate to are detailed in Appendix 3 of the report. If we pick up on the housing programme, actual expenditure for the housing programme is detailed at 7.2, and that was £71.5 million. Again, unspent monies are being carried forward into the new financial year to complete projects. That probably summarises the main parts of the report. In terms of the recommendation, we're asking that the outturn on general services programme and the carry forward be noted and approved. And in relation to the housing capital programme, the same, that the outturn is noted and the carry forward is approved. We'll continue to monitor these programmes through separate reports to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions? And can I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thanks again, and thanks, Jackie. It was a question on 6.6, page 34, the loss of 1.4 million to public services and public infrastructure from Stuart Milne. Was that money allocated for anything for developers' contributions, and how can we avoid these similar losses in future, because it's a significant amount? Thanks.
Thank you. Jackie?
Thank you. This reflects an organisation that went into administration. Obviously, it's out with the council's control. It was part of our overall funding for capital programme, but as we've referred to within the paper, there are other offsetting underspends within the programme that has helped us manage that position. Obviously, we keep a close eye on any partners across the board that provide funding to us in relation to any risk of administration, but unfortunately, it is something that's out with the council's control.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Jackie, a couple of things on transfers. Leisure and Culture Transformation Fund. Is that a timing issue? Or is it funding that they are not requiring for the proposals they had? Because we still have a number of facilities that are not even wind and watertight that are not being addressed at this time through that fund. And it would be useful to be able to transfer that. And the second one is show a disappointment in the fact that the roads budget is underspent at a time when receiving more and more complaints about potholes, etc., and pathways, that we are not using the funds that have been allocated to that committee to that resource to address these challenges.
Okay, Jackie.
Thanks, Councillor Allison. Probably similar response for both of those points. In relation to the Transformation Fund for Leisure, it is just timing. The majority of that spend, probably all of the rest of that money will be spent this financial year over the coming months. There's a detailed plan around how that will operate, so I can give you comfort that that is spending. In relation to roads, again, it just reflects the timing of projects, significant projects rather than just the pothole budget that sits within our revenue budget. So again, that is just reflecting timing and the money is being spent.
Okay, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any, so can I bring us back to the recommendations? Can we agree the report?
Agreed.
We agreed. Thank you very much. Can I take us now to item 6, which is a capital budget monitoring report, and we're still with you, Jackie.
Thank you. So this is our New Year capital report. This is, again, as with the revenue account, it's taken us to the 16th of May. At the background section at the bottom of page 43, we have agreed in February this year a general services capital programme of £60.2 million and a housing capital programme of £85.9 million. This report provides an update on those programmes, but again, sizable capital programme for the year. Firstly, at section 4, we pick up the general services programme, so some adjustments that require to be made to that base capital position. Firstly, it's our investment programme that was agreed as part of the budget in February. That's covered at section 4.2 of the report. We're adding to the budget the capital element of spend that will be incurred this year, so that's £6.6 million. We're also carrying forward £15.1 million that I referred to in the last paper for general services, so that will be added to our capital programme for 25-26. There's a small increase in the capital grant that we received, £109,000, and also active travel funding that has been provided to the council of £857,000 that adds to our capital programme. So as well as those additions to the base programme, we have undertaken the exercise that we would normally do at this point in the year, just to ensure that we're reflecting the correct timing of projects in 25-26. 4.7 of the report details the adjustments that we will make to our capital programme to reflect the timing of those projects. That includes the timescales for the Larkhall Leisure Centre project. It also reflects the profiling expenditure on Shawfield Remediation and Development project that's carried out by Clyde Gateway. It also reflects the timing of expenditure in our secondary schools programme, reflecting the activity that was agreed in this committee last time round in May, and also the profiling of spend around the Three Rivers Clydesdale Way project that is in partnership with neighbouring authorities. That adjusts the programme by £18.7 million, as covered at section 4.8. That takes our overall general services base capital programme to £64.2 million, and that's summarised in table 1 at the top of page 46. Now, in the usual fashion, bringing to the Executive Committee, we would submit amendments that we're proposing. They're detailed in Appendix 1 of the report for your approval, and they total an additional £3.9 million of spend being added to the capital programme. If approved, the overall programme for general services will be £68.1 million. In a similar vein, our housing programme is picked up at section 5 of the report, taking that base agreed capital programme of £85.9 million and adjusting for our carry forward from last financial year. That base position already included an assumption around carry forward, so the only addition we have to add on to that programme to reflect the full carry forward for the year is an additional £1.5 million. On top of that, we have the National Acquisition Programme funding that has now been provided, which takes our total housing capital programme for the year to £87.5 million. If I can take you back to the recommendations, section 2 of the report, we're asking that the general services position and housing capital programme is approved, and that the adjustments that are referred to are also approved, and that we will continue to monitor the programme through this committee and Financial Resources Scrutiny Forum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions on this paper, and could I come to Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. It's just to say I'd really like to welcome this report, and particularly speaking for my own area, to acknowledge the investment in the Clyde Cycle Track and also Eastfield Lifestyles. The Clyde Cycle Track is an amazing community project which has generated employment, has impacted positively on the local economy, and the recent as a boost to the funding will allow the park to be open longer, particularly in the summer nights. So obviously, and benefits in terms of health and well-being for the population. And I think given the challenging circumstances we were in with the budget, I think the investment package as a whole and the additional 3.9 has made a huge difference. And in terms of lifestyle, the kind of remedial work to the sauna and the upgrading, that's going to, again, it's going to attract more people in, more people get involved in exercise and all the other activities that goes on there. And I think overall, the additional investment will have the same, I'm sure, in other areas across the authority. So I would just like to welcome the report and acknowledge that we were able to do such a significant investment package in really challenging times. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I suppose I would just add, maybe picking up on a point from one of the previous questions, if you look at 4.9, you see the lion's share of that Leisure and Culture Transformation Fund is going to come this year, and it will be welcome. Okay, can I come to Councillor Robb?
Thank you. Thanks for the report, Jackie. On page 46, it talks about the additional active travel funding of 0.857 million, which is welcome. And I was just to ask when and where will those projects to be funded be presented? So that's the question. And just a comment on page 50 as well, we've got the details on the CEIF programme presented, which is about reducing emissions and saving the council money on energy bills that go right back into public services. I think more of this needs to be accelerated. Not only does it tackle the climate emergency, move us to net zero, or whatever you want to call it, just good housekeeping. It makes sound environmental and economic sense. So I think we should be looking at in future budgets to accelerate this programme. Linking into the point I've said before about every emission reduction is important in saving the council money in the future and insurance costs and repair costs and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Jackie, do you want to pick any of that up?
Yeah, just in relation to active travel, I know that the funding is being used to progress cycle schemes and walking schemes and pedestrian routes. I can ask my colleagues in Roads if they can provide the details of those projects to you.
Thank you.
In relation to CEIF, we have detailed on page 50 the projects that were taken forward in relation to that CEIF programme. That is a pot of fund that is revolving, that we save money in relation to those projects and we can reinvest that. That kind of forms the value, the amount that we have available for CEIF, and we'll continue to report that back through committee. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any other questions, so can I ask us to agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. Can we come now to item 7, which is an employee workforce monitoring paper, and Michelle Milne is going to speak to this paper. Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. This is a yearly summary report that comes to committee and you will have seen in previous years, and it provides council employment information for the period 1st of April 24 to the 31st of March 25. Going to the bottom of page 55 at section 4, you'll see there information on attendance statistics. The council's average absence rate for the period is 5.9%, which is an increase of 0.5% when compared to the previous year. And what you'll see under that is a breakdown in terms of APT and C, which is sitting at 6%. Teaching staff average is sitting at 3.6%, and the manual workers is sitting at 7.8%. Over the page, at page 56, you'll see a breakdown at the top of that page on the total days lost, which is represented as an increase. And just to put some context there, musculoskeletal and psychological are our main reasons for absence. Musculoskeletal is increased by 1,271 days. That makes up 21% of the absence figure. Psychological has increased by 1,854, and that makes up 34%. And you see there has been an increase in terms of stomach, bowel, blood and metabolic disorders by 4,649 days. That makes up 9% of the figures in totality. At section 5, you'll see a summary of occupational health. It remains positive that employees are taking up these supports. You would hope that they didn't need to, but they are there when they are needed, and they are using these supports. We do have detailed discussions with managers and trade unions around this on a regular basis, and meet the trade unions on a monthly basis. And I know that people tap into areas that they're comfortable with in terms of the supports they want to access. I know they go to the trade union, I know they go to GPs, I know they go to and use the employer supports. There's a whole suite of supports there available for employees. You'll see at section 6, under 6.1, the number of accidents and incidents that were recorded this year was 802, which was a decrease of 1,478 when compared to the previous period. And again, just to add some context to that, just at 6.2, we wanted to advise committee that education resources have been providing focused training aimed at addressing incidents in schools, which they believe has had a positive impact on the number of incidents occurring. And also in terms of data that has been reported, just to task committee to cast their mind back, that second sentence at 6.2, whilst the number of incidents and accidents appear to have reduced significantly, it should be noted that the figures peaked during 23-24 and did include an element of retrospective recording of accidents and incidents from the previous year. So I just wanted to highlight that to committee. At 7.1, you'll see an overview of employee relations matters. That's in the top section of page 57. And during the year, as a summary, there were 183 disciplinary hearings, 13 appeals, 16 grievances, 28 dignity at work complaints, and 7 referrals for mediation. And you'll see how these issues are generated at 7.2, and these numbers can fluctuate, and it's very much in response to any behaviours, conduct, or issues that are reported to us that are not in line with the council policies and procedures, and we pick them up when they're reported. Positively, again, at section 8, you'll see a summary of the employee development activity that takes place in the council. Again, in summary, there are 10,250 attendances at classroom learning, 1,147 attendances at virtual classroom learning events, and 71,809 e-learning packages, which cover a whole range of subjects. You will have seen them online yourself in terms of accessing them. And within those range of learning activities, there's obviously a number of mandatory courses relating to the jobs that people carry out, have to do, and then there are other courses that people can pick up through their appraisal. At the bottom of page 57, just at section 9, you'll see that the turnover figure is 3.9. And then over the page, at page 58, you'll see an analysis of the leavers and exit interviews. And you'll see that of the 601 leavers eligible for exit interview, there was an uptake from our leavers of 16% in terms of giving us feedback through exit interviews. Again, at section 10 on page 50, you'll see a summary of recruitment monitoring information detailed there, which relates to disabled, black ethnic background and applicants who declared themselves as veterans, summarised in that section there. And again, just to flag at 10.2, there has been an action plan with the purpose of increasing ethnic minority representation in recruitment, which was approved at the Employee Equalities, Diversity and Inclusion Forum on the 28th of May. And you'll see the 5 areas that's covering it in the action plan in terms of promoting that activity. That action plan also forms part of the activities in the mainstream inequalities outcome for 25 and beyond, and I will touch on that report later on in the meeting. Section 11 is just some information on staffing watch around our employee numbers. There are no other implications in the report, and I would refer committee back to section 2 in terms of the recommendation to approve that the following employment information for that period be noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions on this report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can you agree to note the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And can I come now to item 8, which is a paper on our revenue budget strategy, and it's back to Jackie Taylor to speak to this report. Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. As is usual at this point in the year, this is our budget strategy report, picking up on work that we reported on last year. This is now including our strategy for budgets for 26-27 and 27-28. If I take you to section 4 of the report, there's a reminder here around the budget gap that we have presented to committee for these years. As part of our report in February on our budget, we reported that the budget gap for the 2 years that I'm covering here was £32.3 million. As a result of decisions that were taken as part of the 25-26 budget, detailing at section 4.4 of the report, that left a recurring budget surplus of £6.7 million. What that means is that reduces our budget gap going forward by that amount. There was also 2 savings that were approved as part of the budget in February, covering waste permits and sheltered housing, that also help reduce our budget gap going forward. You can see in table 1 on page 79, the summary of our residual budget gap for those 2 years is now £24.2 million, and that's broken down over the 2 years in that table. There are a number of reasons for that budget gap that we have reported to committee before, and I've included them in Appendix 1 for your information. That does include the impact of pay. And that's picked up at 4.10 of the report on page 79. Again, I've referred to this in previous papers around pay award, and the paper picks up on other public sector pay offers that have been accepted elsewhere in Scotland that have influenced the local government pay offer. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a current offer on the table for local government employees, and the implications of that in future year pay awards will have to be recognised within our budget. This could be up to £18 million on a recurring basis, which would take our budget gap, including the amount that I referred to in table 1 of the report, up to something in excess of £42 million over the next 2 years. Section 5 of the report picks up on our programme of transformational reviews. Members will be aware of our programme of reviews, and that in the current financial year for 25-26, we approved savings of just under £6.5 million from completed reviews and from savings. We continue with that programme of reviews, and we'll continue to bring proposals to members for approval as part of our budget setting process. But it is unlikely that those reviews will cover the full extent of our budget gap, which, as I said a second ago, could be in excess of £42 million. Another lever that we do have to consider when we are looking at our budget is council tax, and that's picked up at section 6 of the report. There is an illustration at table 2 of what an increase in council tax of, say, 5% per year over these 2 years that this paper is covering would do to our budget gap. You can see that at the bottom of page 80. But section 6 of the report continues on to cover the unique position that South Lanarkshire are in relation to council tax. We have the lowest council tax in Scotland, and it's currently 12% below the Scottish average. If our council tax was at the Scottish average, this could generate additional income for South Lanarkshire of £20.6 million. A strategy that continues to increase South Lanarkshire's council tax at the level illustrated at, say, section 6.3 in table 2, for example, 5% per annum, would leave us significantly below the Scottish average for council tax. A strategy could be developed to consider increasing South Lanarkshire Council's council tax to a level more in line with the Scottish average, and that could happen over a period of years. And the impact of such a strategy is illustrated in the paper and in table 3 of the report on page 82. This is, for illustration only, and council tax will be required to be considered as we look in agreeing the budget for 26-27 later in the year. Options to bridge any residual budget gap after increases in council tax would need to be met from savings. Section 7 of the report picks up a summary of what I've reported, but also next steps for us. There's a few things that still have to happen before we are able to set our budget. That includes the Scottish Government publishing its medium-term financial strategy that we're expecting imminently around that. Whilst that will give an indication, hopefully, of the national financial outlook, It won't give us that clarity yet on our grant that we will receive for 26-27. That won't be known until later in the year when we get our settlement. As I've mentioned a few times, pay award still has to conclude, and that it has to be taken into account in our requirements going forward for our budget. And we also will have to consider our options around council tax and how that is agreed as part of the budget. The timeline for how our budget process will operate is detailed at Table 4 of the report on page 83. This follows an approach to previous years, with a member seminar being planned for November and working through to allowing us to set a council budget for 26-27 by February next year. Other areas picked up in the report, at section 8, I mentioned the reserve strategy paper that we took to our Finance and Corporate Resources Committee last year. And as I mentioned earlier, a commitment to carry on doing that on an annual basis. And that will happen in the autumn of this year. Similarly, we took a paper on financial resilience and sustainability to our Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee in September last year. And that demonstrated our understanding of our financial outlook and gave information on our resilience and sustainability. Again, we're committing to doing an annual update on that to the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Committee. Our communications and public consultation is picked up at section 10 of the report and proposes that we will continue to build on the good work we've done on consultation in previous years for our budget. And section 15 of the report picks up on other implications, specifically specific risks in our budget strategy, and as you'd expect, they include the level of government grant and pay. There is some information in Appendix 1, as I mentioned earlier, around the details of what makes up our budget gap. But if I bring you back to the recommendations on the report at Section 2, we're asking that the position for 26-27 and 27-28 and the budget gap is noted, that the increase due to pay is also noted, and the position on our transformational reviews is also noted. It is the case that the budget gap doesn't yet include any assumptions around increases in council tax, and that a strategy around increasing council tax could contribute towards that budget gap. We're asking that the summary and next steps at section 7 of the report be approved, and that the risks detailed in the other implication sections are noted. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Comprehensive report. Can I ask, are there any questions? And can I come to Katie Loudon?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Jackie. That was indeed a very comprehensive report. Page 91, section 5.1, there's mention of school transport costs and pressures. My group has asked at 3 consecutive education committees for a report outlining final costs and figures on this, not working estimates. The interim chair of education has advised that he would make the council leader aware of our request again ahead of today's meeting. Colleagues, today is the last day of term. An entire school year has now passed since the administration voted to cut school transport. We were advised by the chair earlier that councillors would receive an internal report on this issue. I've got a couple of questions for the chair. Can I ask, please, when that internal report will be available to councillors? Can we have an expected date? Why is it internal and not coming to a committee for scrutiny or easily accessible to the public and the families affected? And I'll take this opportunity once more today, Chair. On behalf of the families affected, can you please push for an urgent update on the cancellation of the number 65 bus service as soon as possible so that these families are not left in the dark all summer?
Right. First of all, the decision in relation to the 65 bus is obviously a decision that's been taken by a private operator, not by this council. Paper will be circulated to councillors. Councillors have had ample opportunity to bring this issue to the council and indeed to bring it to a full council meeting that was postponed because there was no business brought to the council, including by the SNP group. However, I can tell Councillor Loudon that before I came to the committee today, I asked that an update on the 65 bus be included in the paper to be circulated to members.
Could I have a supplementary, Chair, please?
Fire away.
Thank you very much. Could you please advise if the 65 bus was included as a potential mitigation and alternative route of transport on letters that were sent to many parents, carers and families over the course of the last few months? Could you please advise if the council is planning on sending any update to them on that situation over the summer? And could you please advise if the council has had any conversations with First Bus about that?
Right. I will defer to education officials on what updates, or indeed the officials on what updates they will take forward over the summer period. I should say that in line with the wishes of the council, our officials had been engaging with bus operators. Indeed, it led to an additional bus service being put on, and I understand it's been led to some double-decker buses being put on where there are currently single routes. At no point during those discussions with our education officials did First Bus tell us about their plans to withdraw the 65 bus. However, since we've become aware of it, and indeed I think it was local councillors, Labour councillors, who made myself aware of it, we have been engaging with First Bus and engaging with SPT. Are there any other questions? No? No. Okay, and first of all, in relation to this saving, can I just make this clear? And that'll be covered in the briefing, but does not require a meeting or a specific agenda item for the SNP group to understand what the projected saving is in relation to school transport. And frankly, this sort of dog-ate-my-homework excuse as to why the SNP were unable to bring forward an item of business or did not think to include this in their budget amendment back in February does not wash with me. It did not wash with the people of Rutherglen, and it certainly did not wash with the people of Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse on the 5th of June. Are there any other questions? Councillor Loudon.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you confirm then, if you're talking about an internal report, is there going to be no place where this is accessible to the public or open to scrutiny?
An internal briefing, I don't believe it will be marked confidential. It is there for the information of councillors to help you deal with the inquiries that you receive from your constituents. Okay.
Thank you very much, that's helpful.
Are there any other questions? Can I come now to Councillor Johnson-Dempsey?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. You say we didn't bring an item, but I specifically personally asked the chair, the interim chair of education, to discuss with yourself for inclusion at this meeting. And he said he would do so. So don't pretend that the SNP didn't try and bring this towards council business.
Sorry, I dealt with that at the outset of the meeting. The chair relayed a request from the Education Committee. I've dealt with it in the way I've set out. Yeah. My point is that the last opportunity really for the council to move big sums of money around, if it's still the SNP's intention to overturn the decision that was taken by the council in response to the twin terrors of rising costs and the cuts that we faced at the time, if it was still the SNP's intention, they had the opportunity to put that into a budget amendment in February when the council was setting its spending plans for the year, and they did not do it. They backed a budget amendment that backed the cuts. Right. Councillor Loudon.
Thank you very much, Chair. As we've had this conversation many times, there is not a single final figure which we have been provided with, despite asking for multiple committees now, and we've been told repeatedly that we have a working figure. Can you therefore please confirm that this internal report which we're going to receive is going to include a final figure on the estimated saving from this cut to school buses?
I'm going to pass to the Chief Executive on that one.
Okay, yeah, I can confirm that that paper will include a figure, and that's a final figure.
Thank you very much.
Wunderbar. Okay, can I draw us back then, if there are no other questions, to the recommendations? Can I ask that we agree the recommendations in the report? We're agreed. Thank you very much. Could I come now to item 9, which is on the Local Action Fund spend proposals, and could I come to Jackie Taylor?
Thank you, Chair. Members will remember, as part of the budget agreed in February this year, it was agreed that £50,000 would be provided for each of the council's 20 wards. And spend proposals were to come back to this committee for approval following input from local councillors. This paper presents options for 13 of those wards, and they're included in Appendix 1 for approval. Work continues in the other areas, working with officers and members around clarification around costs, viability of projects, before we will bring these back to a future committee expected in August for the remaining wards. So we're looking that the proposals in the appendix are approved, and noting that the future committee will see the proposals for the remaining 7 wards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions on this paper? And can I come to Andrea Cowan?
Thanks, Chair. I'm very disappointed to find, obviously, that Rutherglen, Central and North, my ward, is not included in the list of wards that are having some money at this stage. Unfortunately, even although myself and my ward fellow ward member, Councillor Kalikas, we submitted a detailed costed submission spreading money through a wide demographic and local community groups. And unfortunately, we got no support from the Labour councillor, from Councillor Lennon. Initially, we reached out to Councillor Lennon and asked for a meeting at the start of the process. However, he declined to engage with us. We met with community groups and put together, as I say, a full costed submission. And I again reached out to Councillor Lennon. I sent that to him and said, I know you weren't involved in putting this together, but could we ask for your support so that we can get this money out to communities? To which he said, no, I've already submitted my proposal. No details were forthcoming. We knew nothing about it until last week, when we were advised by council officers as to what his proposal is, which is to spend all of the money on a public convenience. So again, Councillor Kalikas and I have reached out since we found out about his proposal, and we've asked for him to have a chat with us and to compromise, to which he said, no, these are my proposals, end of story. Which is not helpful, I'm sure you'll agree.
Sorry, could I ask you to come to a question rather than relay the discussions that are taking place, I assume, in private, because I don't think that's fair to all the members. So have you got a question?
Excuse me, Chair, just as you cut over me said, so my question is. So my question is, how do we move this forward? How is a decision going to be made in our ward if there's no communication between all of the councillors? Will the majority strike through, or will this be debated at the next executive committee? How are we going to process this? As I say, just what is the procedure when there's not only no agreement, but not even any discussion? Thank you.
Right, thank you. And I'm entitled to intervene in order to ensure good conduct of the meeting. Can I say, in relation to your question, the wards that are set out, you will see that are set out in the appendix, are the wards where we know there is agreement amongst the elected members. So those are indeed where we know the proposals that are bringing forward are feasible and deliverable. There are other wards that are not included in this report where, for a whole range of reasons, there could be disagreements, there could be still proposals to be worked through, there could be technical issues or advice from officers that are going to take some time, and indeed in some instances councillors have requested some additional time to resolve that. There will be different circumstances in each of those wards, but our intention, because I don't want to leave this lying, our intention is to bring forward another paper in August, as it sets out in the paper before you just now, and the Executive Committee would have the opportunity to resolve that. I'm going to bring in Ian, if it's all right, just to make sure I've not missed anything, because a lot of the hard work in this has been done by council officials who have come up with this proposal in which we take forward those wards that we can action just now and deal with the other ones later. So Ian, is there anything that I've missed?
No, I don't think so, Chair, and we'll continue to work with the other remaining wards. And what I've said to those councillors is, the intention be to bring that report back in August for a decision to look to draw a line under matters then, so we could look to have the money distributed and spent.
Okay, thank you very much.
So if I could come back, please, Chair.
Yes.
Can I just have do you have an idea, or does anyone have any idea as to how a decision will be made in a circumstance like ours when there's no, as I said, no agreement and no communication?
I think on the basis of what could have happened at this meeting, but we decided that the best approach was to carry forward areas where there was no obvious agreement to August, not least because we want to try and promote a positive approach to this, where we could try and get some agreement amongst the local members. I think we would end up in a position where those wards where we do not have an agreement, where there are competing proposals, we could bring them in front of the committee. But I would encourage everyone, whatever your party, whatever your ward, to enter into this in the constructive spirit in which this fund was created and intended. Okay.
Yeah, well, I think you'll find that we have tried, as I say, to do that. I've reached out twice personally, but not our ward aside. It's a pity that this money's not going to get into our communities, you know, until later, until after the summer. Thank you.
Eileen Logan.
Thanks, Chair. I won't be naming names or anything like that, but just to say that collectively, and I'm quite sure we'll thank you very much, because the project that we have will encourage even more young people to come in off the street. It's a project that's been there for a long time. It's self-policed by parents and the children and the people who use it, and there's little or no trouble, and it brings youths from all over our area. So it was done collectively, and one of the few, I think. So with collective working, it's going to happen, and we thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I bring us back to the recommendations of the report? Can I ask that they are agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you very much. Can I come now to item 10, which is on Agile working guidance, and can I ask Michelle Milne to speak to this report?
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to seek approval to implement Agile working guidance for all council employees and managers, and seek approval for proposals for standardising Agile working arrangements across the council. Moving on to the background, and I would probably put a bit of context here as well. So this report is about Agile working guidance, and that is against a backdrop of statutory obligations that sit with employers around flexible working. So employees can make applications for flexible working to change the days and hours that they work. There is flexibility within the council should issues arise, should employees have appointments, and a lot of that's covered by our special leave policy. And we also have a suite of occupational health and wellbeing activities, and there's a big focus on health and disability, and I will talk about some of those areas further in the report, but I thought it was beneficial just to add some context in terms of going through this report. So in terms of the background, and again, members will be familiar with this, there has been many changes over the last decade just in terms of customer interactions for our councils, many councils and many other organisations. At 3.2, you'll see that during and post-COVID, the council did encourage resources to make full use of any advances in technology and new ways of working that would improve service delivery to service users and customers, and employees would benefit from those new ways of working as well. At 3.3, as a consequence of all of that, this has resulted in a range of flexible and agile working arrangements being agreed within the council, including the ability to work from home. However, as it stands today, there is no policy or guidance for employees or managers to refer to, or indeed for the council to rely upon and refer to if any issues arise. And this lack of policy or guidance has resulted in some inconsistencies in the operational application of these arrangements across the council. So at 3.4, as a result of the inconsistencies in working arrangements in place across the council since October 24, and being very aware that post-COVID many other organisations were looking at this as well, work has been underway to consolidate some of these arrangements. So what we did as a starting point with our own employees in the council is we carried out a review and verification exercise to basically gather data on what was existing as it stood today in terms of current work styles and arrangements within the council, and particularly around the number of employees that we had that were operating in frontline services who were in every day, all day in terms of delivering those frontline services, or those employees who work between a work location or work from home in an agile way. So that gave us a really good starting point. At 3.5, in the background, the lack of guidance for employees and managers and trade unions as well as the council on agile working arrangements can cause difficulties when dealing with absence matters or employee relations matters within the council. An example of this is where managers and employees have been in conflict around work being required to be carried out in the workplace. Turning over the page to page 102, at 3.6, and I'm going to spend just a wee bit of time explaining this in terms of the context of the review and verification exercise that we carried out. So the council at the time of gathering this information had 17,060 employees, and of these 13,570 employees provide frontline services from a designated work location, leaving the remaining 3,497 who had the potential to work in an agile way within the council. So what we've done at 3.7 is explain what that breakdown meant just in terms of where people were working from at that time. So you'll see that we had 1,870 employees who were currently working between 60 and 100% from their place of work, in the office or their place of work. There was 819 at that time that were operating from their place of work. And then there's about 800 of 17,060 employees who currently worked 40% of less in the workplace. So that meant they would be working from home at the other time. So that's really important in terms of understanding where our employees were currently sitting at and what their working arrangements were. So based on what currently exists, the approach being recommended within this report in terms of creating agile guidance is aligned to the data that we have collected in terms of the majority of employees, and it's very much aligned to approaches adopted by other councils and other organisations, which you'll probably see in the news, in terms of creating guidance and policies around this. The council has always been transparent in previous communications, and that was the kind of post-COVID, when we were getting back into the workplace, etc., that this would remain under review in terms of always taking cognizance of customers, service users and delivery of services. You'll see at 3.9 as well that this approach is very much aligned to the review that's taken place of corporate standards, and that's about how we deliver our services to customers and service users, as per the report, in terms of reference presented to the Performance and Review Scrutiny Forum in November 24. So that's available for anyone to have a look at. It also directly links to how the council provides services to its customers and service users and the standards and consistency of approach adopted there. It is vital that council services are responsive to customers and service users, and employees remain contactable in line with corporate and standard services. At 3.10, we're beginning to introduce you in the report to what we're proposing in terms of 4 work styles across all posts within the council, which are fixed frontline, fixed office, fixed grade 5 and above, and agile office. And that's detailed in section 5. In terms of section 4, around agile working and guidance, you'll see that the agile guidance has been developed and is based on the findings from that internal review and verification exercise. I suppose we're seeing this as a proposal to formalise a lot of what is already in place for the majority of employees. It's also important to say that we didn't do this in isolation. We did link in with the Improvement Service, the Association for Public Service Excellence, which is APSE, Society of Personnel and Development in terms of what's happening in other councils through personnel services, and we also linked in with COSLA, some of that more informally. The guidance aims to provide a transparent, fair and consistent approach to the operation of agile working arrangements across the council, which will ensure that working arrangements fully support service delivery requirements, and it also gives employees, managers, trade unions and the council something to refer to and rely upon. You'll see in section 5 that fully describes council office and agile work styles there, which I have mentioned. So there's a description there on what those work styles are. So there's a fixed frontline, which obviously applies to the majority of staff. There's fixed office grade 5 posts and above. And we've got a fixed office and or location, and then there's a kind of agile office where agile working is available to employees. At section 6, there are proposals around if agile guidance is adopted and the work styles are implemented. You'll see that what we're proposing there is employees are going to be provided with a 3-month lead-in time. And that is about communication to employees, to managers and services, and it provides a reasonable period to make any necessary arrangements that may be required and allow resources to finalise that arrangements. Although on the data that I did refer to at 3.7, you'll see that the majority of people are working 60% and over already in terms of their time in the workplace. At 6.2, you'll see that 3-month lead-in time will also allow an opportunity to deal with any agile working change requests. And what I mean with that, any policy that we do have in the council, there's usually an application there for that, and there's normally an appeal process there for that. So it's very similar to lots of other policies, procedures that we have, albeit this is guidance. And that's to allow for anybody who says, I'm in a job, this is the work style that's attached to my job, I can work agilely, but that 60%, I want to make an application to vary that in some way, and they would then put a justification, give reasons for that, and that would be considered, and there's an appeal process with that. I would also say, very importantly, and I mentioned this at the start in terms of maybe health and disability, there are employees who work with us already who, just because of their circumstances in terms of health or disability, we've carried out individual employee risk assessments. We've looked at tailored adjustments in terms of any health or disability that they are living with. And we also, where needed, make occupational health referrals so that we've got medical information if that needs to be considered as well. So there is a robust process around that in terms of supporting employees who wish to make an application if they wish to vary a work style. I would say in terms of that, you'll see yourself, and I'm going to refer you to page 109 in the report, the option for people to ask for an application to vary really applies to work style 2 and work style 4. And the reason for that, and you'll see at work style 1, a teacher, a waste operative, a home carer, etc. couldn't work from home. That's a frontline service and you wouldn't be able to do that. And you'll see the same for work style 3, where a school support, so there's a few examples there. A school support assistant, a facilities assistant, the only way for them to literally do their job is in that place of work. So I just wanted to clarify who that would be open to use. 6.4, we're just referring you to guidance, because I think it's really important if people are making applications to change to understand the guidance in both the employee and the manager, as well as the trade unions and ourselves, and in supporting that, have that to refer to. So what that would mean, you'll see at 6.5, there would be a 3-month implementation period, which is a lead-in time from July to September, with the guidance and the work styles would be fully introduced in October 25. We would also propose, as we did post-COVID, that we don't leave things as they are and we do continue to look at, review and monitor this situation. And at 6.6, we're proposing that we conduct a review exercise in 18 months. Turning over the page to page 104, you'll see we've created a section here on exceptions and change requests, and I have just mentioned this in terms of that would apply to work styles 2 and 4 and the reasons and the logic for that. We've attached Appendix 2, which you'll see at 7.2, the change request guidance and pro forma, so the committee could see what that looked like and what was contained within that. At 7.3, you'll see that for employees who have declared that they have a disability or previously disclosed health condition, there are certain activities we would carry out around that. And at 7.4, for new employees to the council, and again this is very much in line with what other local authorities and employers in general are doing, it will be for managers to determine with the employee based on the post requirements, because every post is different, some more complicated than others or more varied than others, that an appropriate induction and training period would take place, and that may include a fixed period of permanent office-based working for an agreed period of time till the person settles into that role and is comfortable and confident in doing that. You'll see at section 8, other considerations and implications. Just wanted to make committee aware that there's currently no reference in any employee contracts from working to working from home, and therefore we're not proposing any changes to any contracts of employees. And this is guidance that we're proposing is put in place to be used when dealing with agile working. However, given that it is a shift in a low number of employees in terms of what they might be doing, and this is employees working maybe 40% and less just now in the office, that is why we are suggesting that there's a lead-in time to this going forward if it is approved. It's also important to let you know that 8.2, given the amount of office accommodation within the council building, there is sufficient capacity to support any of the changes, particularly when there is a low number of employees who may make a shift in terms of the working arrangements. 8.3, I think it's important to note that Agile working has been taking place and with these proposals it will continue to take place. And employees who currently work in an Agile way already have the necessary equipment that are required to work from home. So when people were working from home, we checked keyboards, monitors, etc., laptops, anything they needed. And we do a DSE assessment in terms of health and safety as well, just to make sure that people have the right equipment. I would also say 8.4, the Council have been in consultation with the trade unions, and that consultation has concluded on the proposals for the introduction to Agile guidance. During that process, which has been taking place for a number of months, from at least the start of the year, and where we were doing the verification exercise last year, and there have been healthy, challenging discussions with the trade union, and we have taken on board a lot of the feedback that the trade union have given us and incorporated in that, whether it's language, words. They've also, as well as fed back on the guidance, have had feedback on the pro forma that were used in the appeal process, which has been helpful. And I suppose the bit that the trade union remained disappointed at, that we're fixing 3 and 5 days, our view on that is that that is a reasonable and balanced approach, particularly given the data that we collected through the review and verification exercise in terms of the potential impact of this. In terms of Section 9, employee implications, the proposed guidance would provide clarity on the Council's position relating to Agile working, and it gives employees, managers, trade unions and ourselves dealing with any issues in the Council something to refer to and rely upon just now, which we don't actually have. So again, just to say there's no financial implications, detailed at Section 10, and at Section 12 you'll see that we've carried out an integrated impact assessment, and that is online if anybody wants to refer to that or has any questions on any of that. So in terms of this report, I'll refer committee back to recommendations just at Section 2, which are that the Agile working guidance and proposals contained within this report for standardising Agile working arrangements across the Council, as attached to Appendix 1, be approved, and that the implementation timescales detailed in Section 7 of the report be approved. And happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Could I ask if you have any questions, could you indicate now? There are a few. Before I take some, Michelle, this is in the report, but I just want to, given some of the concern that there has been, and thank you for addressing some of that in your email yesterday, but just given some of the concern that there has been, can you just confirm what you said there, that part of the change request would mean not just varying your work style, but varying the balance of home working versus office-based working as well? So can you just confirm it? And that is in addition to the rights that our workforce have when it comes to flexible working.
So thank you. Happy to do that. So there's obviously statutory obligations for all employers around health, around disability, around the ability of an employee to ask to vary their contract in terms of changing their working pattern, days, hours. We have a suite of special leave supports in place, etc., which I mentioned. But importantly, with this guidance, the application to vary provides an opportunity for employees in those two groups, not our frontline services, to make a request, and that would be considered. And that's why the proforma is in there, so you can see what's contained in that and what would be considered. And there's guidance also for managers. We are conscious it is new guidance, so we would be providing support just in terms of how that is initially implemented, so that we're given support, because there might be some things come up that maybe we haven't considered or thought of. So it's just as a precautionary measure, and to make sure that we are all aware as we're dealing with this, and any learning can be picked up as well.
Okay, I think this is important for me because what we're talking about here is guidance, as opposed to the imposition of a blanket policy. There's guidance and there's flexibility within it. I want to just acknowledge that there has been some concern about this, and I want to also acknowledge that there is a febrile debate about working from home that's playing out in some sections of the media, and that's not what this is about, and that's not where this council should be. I think we just want to get to a reasonable policy that works for, ultimately that works for when it comes to delivering services for the people of South Lanarkshire, but it's fair to our workforce, it's fair to management, and it's something that, a policy that we can refer back to. I'm going to make a proposal in terms of how we take this forward, just recognising that there's been some concern, but before I do that, I can see there are a number of questions, and I'm going to allow the questions to work our way through the debate. I am conscious it's now 11:20, so we might have to take a break before we've concluded this item, but I'll see how we progress through the questions first. Okay, so could I come to Councillor Cal Johnson-Dempsey?
Thanks, Chair. Colleagues, some of you may know that one of my previous roles before coming into the council was as a business agility coach and trainer. The word agile in this paper seems to me to be getting used as a bit of a buzzword. A better, more accurate term would be remote or hybrid working policy. Because while where work is done is tangential to business agility, there's no mention of true lean agile practices anywhere in this report. To the contrary, the rigidity that this paper would impose would actually harm our responsiveness to change. Because, to be clear, South Lanarkshire right now is anything but agile. We're about as traditional, waterfall and slow to react as they come. And maybe it's the fact that I'm in my 30s, so I'm considerably younger than many of my fellow councillors. But hybrid working has been an aspect of my career since my first job out of uni. None of this is new. The council is a large organisation, but it's minuscule in comparison to the national and global corporations in finance, technology, energy and other sectors. My great-grandfather worked in this building many decades ago, and in his day it would have been packed full Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. But it's the 21st century. We live in a time of corporate reform and public sector reform. Everyone from your local estate agent to global giants are using hybrid working for the benefit of both employers and employees. There's no remote working factor in which this council is unique. Obviously, there are jobs you can't do from home. You can't repair roads or provide personal care from your kitchen table or your spare bedroom, and no one would suggest that you could. Obviously, there are some employees that wouldn't want to work from home and would prefer the office environment, and we should absolutely be respecting that as well. But this policy does not feel to me to be about what's best for the council as a whole or for individual workers. I believe this is about leaders in the administration being able to see work getting done, but we don't measure work in presenteeism. We measure it in results and output. If we want to recruit and retain the best people, we need to create good, happy, flexible working environments. If I'm a project manager or an HR professional, an admin assistant, or a whole host of other professions, I've got a lot of options in where I can work. If it's between South Lanarkshire Council that wants me to commute 45 minutes in both directions, 5 days a week, as some of these roles would be, costing me time and money, or another organisation, private or public, that respects me and my time and allows me more work from home, I know which one of those I would choose. We employ adults to do sometimes really hard jobs. We don't always pay them what they're due. We should at least be treating them like adults and allow them to carry out the functions that we're hired for, not micromanaging them like children. Hybrid working is good for our finances as a council, our environmental targets, and our employee relations, and I believe we should be keeping that as is.
Okay. If it's a point of order, Right, no, so that's all right. If there are debating points, I'll come to you, but I'm not going to it's not a point of order. And also, I'm just conscious there are probably still people here with questions to ask about the paper as well. So I'm going to try and get through as much of this as I can. But can I move? Was there a question there? Sorry.
I know you disallowed the point of order, but I'm happy to answer the question if you would like.
I've disallowed it because I don't want a point of order to be used for a debate. I'm going to try and work my way through there are a large number of people who want to come in. I'm going to try and work through them. Can I come to Katie Loudon?
Thanks very much, Chair. This is a wee bit more specific, and it's essentially about attendance on the basis of the frequently asked questions section. We've got question 7 on page 118. In a previous paper, we were advised about 22,000 working days being lost to absence, which sounded a wee alarm bell for me when I thought about this paper. So question 7 asks if it's permitted for an Agile worker to work from home on an office day if they're too ill to attend their work. And I'd like to ask about how this applies to short-term health issues like a short illness or an injury, not longer-term conditions or illnesses. As you'll have noticed, I'm at home today, and you might have noticed I'm sitting on a slightly strange chair. I'm recovering from a back injury currently, and my mobility has been suffering. I haven't had to be signed off work because I'm perfectly capable of propping myself up and getting on with my work. And I'm grateful to my manager for taking a sensible approach to this and allowing me to work from home. And of course, as councillors, we're able to work remotely. And again, I'm grateful that this injury hasn't stopped me from being able to participate today. Now, there's not really a straight answer on this question in the frequently asked questions, and it seems to be focused on illness rather than injury. And I'll be completely honest, if I was a council employee or a manager, I'm not really sure if I would read this as a yes or a no. Can you work from home on a day when you're not well enough to be in work, but you could manage to work from home? Wouldn't it be better for work to be done from somewhere than not being done at all? And is this answer really suggesting that there shouldn't be any flexibility? And if you're off, that you're off? Because to me, I can't really see how that's helping anyone. And I think this point needs to be far clearer for both employees and managers than it is in its current form.
Okay, Michelle, do you want to pick that one up?
Yes, thanks for the question. And yeah, right, there is potentially no clear answer. But given what you've said, we can certainly adapt that in the FAQs in terms of adding to that. I think I would say whether someone's at home or whether they're at work, if they're really too ill to be working at all, we would not want them to be working at all. If, like the example that you had given there, that someone says, I'm too, maybe unwell is the wrong word, but I've got an injury, say, for example, I can manage this, but I can't manage that. We are grateful that somebody is able to do that, and if we can get some work out of someone during that, we would absolutely do that. And it would be done on a case-by-case basis, and to be honest, we do that quite a lot just now anyway through our Max App policy. You'll see that probably more when people do phased returns to work. So some of that might be home-based, it might be a shorter week, and then it builds up into a longer week from home, and then maybe a shift back into the office. So some of that is in place already, but we can certainly clarify that and expand that answer, and maybe give more examples if that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Michelle for the report. I share the same concerns and agree with the points made by my colleagues, Councillors Johnson Dempsey and Loudon. But building on that, we should all be aware of the value and importance of trade unions. Without trade unions, we wouldn't have the employment rights and protections that we see today, such as sick pay, maximum hours, or the minimum wage. They should be at the heart of every change we make regarding workers' conditions or patterns, like the changes that are being proposed today. And to that point, the lack of details contained in this report regarding that does not give me the confidence that this has been the case. I know there's been some engagement, and Michelle's expanded on that a little bit, but that is covered by a very small section and refers to the appeal/request process and not the main proposals themselves. Simply stating that trade unions agree on a requirement for guidance and that they will support individual employees, which we know they already do, again, does not give confidence that we've adequately engaged. We found out subsequently, not in this report, that the main proposals are not supported and were deemed non-negotiable. In fact, out of the Unison members surveyed, it was found that there was no support for the main proposals. Additionally, there's been no evidence presented that current working practices have led to a reduction in productivity. The concerns around practices seem to be anecdotal from senior councillors rather than based on evidence. The research referred to in the report is also difficult to find. What I can find is not extensive, and it's not shown how it supports these specific proposals. We also don't know the full number of employees affected by this in each category. I know there's some statistics there on the kind of current balance, but it'll be useful to know the total number of employees who will have hybrid working completely removed. We should not be imposing these changes without further details to know exactly what the situation is and the effect it will have, and without further discussion with trade unions. It's for the reasons I've set out that I am moving an amendment that this paper be deferred to allow for further discussion with trade unions with a view to seeking agreement and bringing back a more detailed report for decision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try and return to the debates. I know a lot of people still have questions about this. Can I ask, do you have a seconder for that motion?
Yes, Councillor Johnson
Dempsey. Right, I've got him. Amendment, I should say. Right, okay, I'm going to come back to that, but if you bear with me, there are still a number of people looking to come in. Kirsten Robb.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle, for the report. It is a bit quite ironic that the people who have the most agile working, ourselves as councillors, and who have the least detailed knowledge of service requirements are being asked to vote on this today. I would hope that the council would make evidence-based decisions. That's definitely good practice, but unfortunately in this paper there's not a lot of evidence presented. For example, you mentioned about the internal review assessing the impact. We haven't been able to get a copy of the internal review. The integrated impact assessment says there's an unknown impact on the well-being of staff. The integrated impact assessment also says there's a possible negative effect on staff commuting emissions, and that's actually in contravention to what we as councils have signed up to in the climate change strategy, which is to reduce staff emissions to zero as much as possible, as soon as possible. So we have to watch out for that. There's no assessment of the impact on recruitment and retention in a tight and competitive labour market. There's no assessment on the impact on productivity when APSI studies have been highlighted to us that the productivity increases or has no impact with agile working. There's no impact or connection with the estate strategy that we're working on. We're also working on a staff travel plan. So what's been presented is not evidence-led policy decision making, and we can't make a decision based on this lack of evidence on impact. So I would support the amendment from the SNP there to take this back. We don't have the impact, and I'd ask for a fuller impact assessment as well. 2 years ago, we passed the New Deal for Employees, which included a commitment to look at a 4-day working week. I'd like to move separately to this paper that we ask for an update on that, and that we get that by December to take forward the rested and engaged staff that was aspired to. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to, there's another amendment. This is where it's all going to get complicated. If I can say the 4-day working week, I think, has been pursued via COSLA, but there's a request there for an update, which is fine. I'm going to come back to all these amendments, if it's all right, and just try to work my way through the questions people have about the paper itself. Can I come to Robert Brown?
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. First of all, could I thank people for their contribution to this? I think people have thought about the issues and have made sensible contributions towards it. It seems to me that there's 3 issues we need to look at. One is the council service and the needs of it, and to an extent that stands at the top of the list because of the fact we are a public service, as Mark Walker talked about. The second relates to the individual position of staff, and their abilities and the things they may have with childcare, with care arrangements or other things, and the linked issues, I suppose, of being able to avoid unnecessary commuting costs and things of that kind. And the third relates really to recruitment. And I would like to ask, just by way of question mark, two things, if I may. First of all, can we have some degree of report back on what the positions with other councils around, how what we're doing compares with them, and if there's thought to be any kind of recruitment issues there? I think we have made a bit of an issue of the fact we do offer a fairly flexible sort of approach. Secondly, in terms of the flexibility of these arrangements, can I have an assurance, because I think this lets I think the desire of consistency is important, and I think that's what the paper is trying to do. It is, however, important that on the ground it's worked out flexibly. And can I therefore have an assurance that in the way in which this is taken forward, that the requests for exemptions, if that's the way to put it, will be dealt with flexibly and with a view to them being granted wherever possible? Because I do think this actually relates to the issue of people's own personal responsibility and the way that they go forward in that regard. I think these are the questions I wanted to ask. There's an overlap with existing rights. I think that's perhaps been underplayed in the debate so far, in the sense that these things exist anyway. The practices are there and required by law anyway and are being carried out by us anyway. And I think that does give a kind of flavour to the thing as to the way in which it should be approached as well. Final point, if I may, I do think there's an issue about what you might call esprit de corps. I think there's an important aspect of people, and really why I've personally supported councillors coming into major meetings particularly. I think it's quite important to engage with other colleagues. There's a training, there's an element of learning from that. There's an issue of knowing what other people in the department, how they work, and just having that informal engagement, which I think is important from the office-based aspect of the thing as well. Anyway, the two questions, perhaps, if I might.
Thank you. So in terms of the first question, which is around recruitment, what are other people doing? Is there an impact? Have we seen any impact in terms of what we're doing? I think across the board in Scotland, we are very aware, just in terms of age profile, particularly with senior posts, and this is for every local authority in Scotland, and I think we have been very fortunate in our recruitment because of our location in terms of we are central in Scotland. So people have had to work harder in general around chief officer posts, and we've been very successful. Now, what I can say about recruitment and retention is we have not had any problems with recruitment and retention that have indicated that there is anything to do with people leaving in terms of how we work. What I would also say is that other local authorities and other businesses, private sector as well, are making steps to have a balance, or have guidance, or have policies on what they mean by agile and or hybrid working, just depending on the type of organisation it is. So we are not an outlier in terms of what we are doing. So if you look at our colleagues next door in North, they've done a 50-50 approach. Post-pandemic, they made a move to have everybody back in the office all of the time. And what they've shifted to is a 50-50 approach in terms of being back in the office. So we're not significantly different from what other organisations are doing. I would absolutely provide assurance around the flexibility of these arrangements. And I suppose some of the logic around this as well is when I look at the verification exercise, it was literally what are people doing today in terms of where they're working from. So we have that data, we've got that data broken down by resources, by numbers. We can easily split that across the two work styles in terms of sharing information. But that flexibility is there, and the purpose of the guidance is to allow us to have something to be flexible around rather than have nothing, is the logic with that. I think the point that you made around engaging with colleagues and that social interacting, there are probably various studies, and you'll be aware of this. At a recent COSLA event, I know that the NHS in Wales particularly has done extensive work around this, and they think it is very good for your mental health and well-being in terms of having that interaction, having a balance of both, but also catering for, which you had mentioned, there are some people who want to be in the office all the time, so they may have circumstances at home, whether that's young children and or animals or things like that, but it's just not conducive. They don't have the space to be able to work from home. So We have, during the pandemic, after the pandemic and today, taken into account individual circumstances of employees as well. Some people just don't have the capability or ability to do that. But I would definitely give you assurance around the flexibility of the arrangements.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to Alec Allison?
Thanks, Chair. Robert has brought up a lot of the points I was going to be asking, but the first thing I was wanting to say was my disappointment in the fact that no one has mentioned the most important people in this, and that is our constituents and the service that they receive. And it is the service that they receive that is important. I'm quite sure that many of them won't have noticed, but I have noticed an increase in the post bag, if you like, in a disruption in communications. So I think it is important for that reason, and the fact that, and I've forgotten how many years ago now was it, we brought these rules in. They had to be brought in fairly sharply and with no hindsight, if you like, a track record. So it's right that we've had a review of how that is operating. And that's really what I see that we have today. And we therefore need to have proper rules of engagement of how that's going to happen. I believe that what we see today is a good balance. We can see that you can work from home, and remember, as has been said by others, guidelines, not firm rules, guidelines, so that people can work to the best of their abilities, if you like. Sorry, I'm repeating what has been said. There is flexibility there. And also very important, what Councillor Brown was saying was about the need for interaction, not just between councillors, but between staff and councillors, etc., so that relationships can develop. Yes, there are modern ways of taking some of that forward, but there's nothing meets better than eye-to-eye contact. Don't think there's a question in that for you.
I don't think there is either, so I'll come to Councillor Walker.
Thanks, Chair. A lot of it has been said.
Press your button again, please.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's it.
Sorry, I did press it. I won't repeat a lot of what's been said, but yeah, I was going to speak about the research being done. I think there are two groups in this. There's groups that are able to very easily work at home, but there is also research evidence that says it does affect mental health. It can affect physical health as well if you don't, have a good environment from which to work. And I think that's been a sort of silent, and it might be a minority, but it's a significant minority. I agree again with all the comments. You learn from other people. You learn how to, conduct yourself in meetings. You learn on the job from other people. So I welcome this paper. I think it's got the right balance, and the flexibility is still there. Nobody is saying that flexibility should be taken from people. So on that basis, I would say, and I think the evidence is there to support that. We're not outliers. We're not doing what other authorities are not doing. We're simply providing the guidance and the structure and allowing the flexibility within that. And I think definitely it is good, particularly younger employees, to be in the office with other people. And to get back to the key point, we're here for the constituents, so they should always have access to staff and face-to-face. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jerry.
Yeah, very briefly. As somebody that's been here for the beginning, I welcome the report. I think the report's it's well founded. There's been a lot of detail. We've got 6 unions in this authority. There's only one union that sent a correspondence, and I could ask a million questions to that union. Who did you contact? Did you contact all your members? But Alec Allison made the point that I've stressed to anybody who wants to listen to me. We are here to serve the electorate of South Lanarkshire Council. We're here to give them the best services we can. And at the end of the day, the vast majority of the workforce in this authority can't work in agile surroundings. But setting that aside, the people that can, and Michelle has eloquently explained it, these people are not going to be isolated. They'll be spoken to, they'll be talked through things. And Margaret Walker's right. There's some people, and I've read every piece of correspondence that's been sent to me. At the end of the day, there are people, how can a team, let's say a team of engineers or a team of roads engineers are working, how can they do that and they're sitting in their own house in isolation? The place for these things has been sorted out. Michelle has sat down with the unions, and to my knowledge, the only union that's sort of raised any concerns, which to me are unfounded, are Unison. The other 5 unions are quite happy. So at the end of the day, let's not forget what, and I'm not going to fight with anybody. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But we're not imposing anything. Well, it's a phraseology that people use. We're not imposing anything on anybody. We're not changing people's terms, conditions. We are just giving guidance to the workforce, to the management, the officers, and also to our constituents, but more importantly, to councillors. Because there's no use councillors talking to their constituents and they don't know. I can take that and I can say, there's the guidance, there's what we're doing. And I've got to say, since I've been here for 95, this council, and it's still seen like this all over Scotland, we're a progressive council that look after not only our constituents, but our workforce as well. And we've got a proven record of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I can see I've got a number of people who are looking to come back in, and at this point I really do want to bring this to a head because we've been speaking for some time. I've got a suggestion that I think might move this along. Can I maybe just come to Paul Manning, I suppose, just to pick up some of these points about flexibility and implementation, and maybe just kind of stressing from a corporate point of view what sits behind this?
Listen, thanks, Chair. And there's points that have been made that I'm not going to go back over. Just see if I can point back to one of the points that Michelle came in on in terms of she laid out the thinking and the basis behind that. It's about setting a baseline, right? And Michelle made the point that one of the areas that the council has been found wanting on in terms of how it engages with the individuals and individual employees is that we didn't have a stated position around some of this coming off the back of the pandemic. So this is about, and some of the phrases that have been used around things like rules of engagement and something to be flexible around, that's the basis at the back of this. This is about saying, look, this is the baseline that we're going to work from. There's thinking behind that, and I'll come back to that in a second. But what we would do in engaging with employees is to try and have flexibility in our approach. So take it from me, right, in terms of how we would look to engage with people and in terms of how we would implement this, I would make sure that there's reasonableness applied in the approach from end to end. That's from the first engagement through to any appeal process that we work through. Right, so people are not putting us out by doing this. This is, Michelle has laid out a way of working, and we need to have a discussion with people and individuals around that, which, hopefully takes us in the right direction. I mean, part of what we've talked about as well, to come back to your point, Chair, about maybe some of the corporate thinking behind this, we are trying to set guidance and something that we can work to across the organisation. We'll apply that to individuals. Part of why Michelle's stated the position that she had and put the baseline where she's put it is around thinking about the fact that culturally as an organisation we need to look at how we build teams. So that's, as I think Councillor Convery and others have said, teams of officers, about interacting with each other. To the last meeting, Michelle brought, I think, the workforce planning document, and one of the conversations that happened was around how the council's good at training, how it brings on employees. So how do you become an environmental health officer? How do you become an accountant? How do you become, an engineer? Part of it, how do you become a chief executive? I'll say that is by watching other people and their behaviours and how they do their job and picking things up as part of that contact in the office. It's an important thing, right? So culturally, there's, for the organisation, I think there's an impetus to do that, how you do your job. The other part of this is around a team that we have, which is between ourselves as officers and senior officers and yourselves as elected members. You need to feel that you can have contact with us. And I'll be honest with you, a point that has been made to me across the past 2 years is it's difficult to get some people. Some people aren't around. Now, I need to take that seriously and I need to address that, because to come back to the point that you've all made today, the reason we are all here primarily is to serve the people of South Lanarkshire. Now, culturally, right, if we're setting a tone, I think what Michelle has put together has the right balance. What I'm saying alongside that is in terms of flexibility and looking at individuals, we are progressive. We will apply what gets put in place by yourselves with an even-handedness and with a reasonableness in terms of the application, and I'll make sure that happens from end to end. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to pick up the last of these points, and then, as I say, I've got a suggestion myself, but I'll just resolve how we're going to deal with the democratic side of this. So can I come to Cal Johnson, Dempsey?
Yeah, thanks for allowing me back in, Chair. I'll be quick. Councillor Walker made a point that the council's not a private business. I don't think I suggested that it was. But employees we want to hire are operating in a mixed private and public job market. And hybrid working is prevalent throughout the public sector, in other councils, NHS, HMRC, DVLA and a ton of other public bodies. In terms of the various points on productivity and service delivery that members made, of course we want the best for our constituents, but there's evidence that working from home, there's no evidence that working from home actually is less productive. In fact, there's anecdotal evidence that many find the office environment distracting and detrimental to their productivity. And in any case, productivity of individual workers is a matter for their supervisors to manage. Pardon me. And the council's got strong capability and performance management policies that they can already apply. Councillor Convery, you might have been here from the start, but it's not 1995 anymore. The world's different. We have technology developments greatly in the 30 years since. And I do appreciate the Chief Exec's assurances about flexibility, reasonableness and even-handedness in the application of the guidance. I've no doubt that's exactly what you would do. But the SNP amendment does not move against the idea of guidance in its entirety. All we're asking is that there's extra time for officers to gain trade union agreement and document those flexibilities that you've assured in the wording of the guidance when it comes back to us. Our group stands with our employees and their trade unions, and I'm very happy to second Councillor Clark's amendment.
Could I come to Kirsten Robb?
Thank you. In my earlier words, I talked about that the report highlights major gaps in evidence. People have talked about anecdotal evidence, but we shouldn't be making policy on anecdotal evidence. One example is that one of my colleagues suggested there about the assessment of impact on agile working and responding to constituent queries and so on. Well, where's the evidence on that? Is it just anecdotal, or are we actually going to look in detail before we make a policy? This is not good policy making. In fact, you said it's guidance, or some people say it's a policy because it's imposed as well. And are we just going to ignore the fact that this will increase staff emissions, even though we have got a commitment elsewhere in the council to reduce staff emissions to zero as soon as possible? This is also not joined up policy making. Let's get to the root and evidence and join up policy across the council and make decisions based on good evidence that is presented to members. Let's get that evidence and think about it again.
Okay, thank you. Can I come back to you? You made a suggestion earlier on. I want to just deal with the democratic bit. Do you have a seconder for that amendment? What's this one? Right, okay, sorry. So, Kirsten, if it's all right, Kirsten, I can maybe deal with this. I think, sorry, I can, no, it's all right. I want to get this resolved, so don't worry about it. So I think your suggestion was similar to the SNP amendment, which is that you defer the paper. but you had this additional request about a report coming forward at some point on that progress in the 4-day week. That was, if I'm understanding it, that was it. Now, I'm guessing the conversation that's taking place is to say you're basically agreeing to a deferral, so you're kind of talking about the same thing. And I'm happy for us at some point, I will need to investigate where we are to bring forward some update on that other aspect of policy. Does that maybe deal with the second part and maybe allows you to work out that you're basically moving for a deferral? Brilliant. Thank you very
much. We'll wait to see what you say yourself, Joe,
right.
And also, but as a separate item, get an update on that, because we want to respect and make sure our staff are well engaged and rested as intended.
Right. Oh, brilliant. So this is just make it easier for when it comes to a vote, but thank you. I'm going to come to Ross Clark now.
Thank you again, Chair. The word guidelines has been used quite a bit in the report and during the debate, suggesting that it is just guidelines. So if they are just guidelines, then surely employees who don't agree, who aren't successful through their appeal process, or managers who don't agree can just not comply. Because if that's not the case, then they are being imposed and they aren't simply just guidelines they can or can't adhere to. I think there's been some very selective wording so far in regards to that. There's also been a mention that, you know, our primary concern is our constituents. That's absolutely true, and we absolutely agree with that. But I think we've kind of forgotten that many of our workforce will also be constituents, and we should absolutely be doing the best by them. And thirdly, it was mentioned that the other trade unions are happy with this. Well, where's the evidence of that? I would like to see that in the report. I would like to see that presented to us. I don't think verbal reassurances are quite frankly good enough. And I think that also adds to the points Councillor Robb was making about the lack of evidence being used in this. So I repeat that I would like to propose the amendment that this be deferred to allow for further discussion with trade unions with a view to seeking agreement and bringing back a more detailed report for decision. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you. Can I maybe bring this back to myself? Or does Michelle, is there anything in that you want to pick up, maybe at that point around how managers manage if this is just guidance? Yeah.
I think probably a few points. Just to clarify, there's actual data that we've obtained from employees in terms of current working patterns and how people are working, and we are seeing this guidance as formalising a lot of what pre-exists already. In terms of some of the references we've made in the report, so in terms of the apps, so this was work carried out in 2022 and it was national research findings. And actually it was varied, so if you think this was just after the pandemic, so some people were thinking about 100% home-based, 100% office-based. There's two bits of data around 42.55% of organisations saw productivity increases from home, 37% saw no difference whatsoever. And I suppose how we're looking at this in terms of productivity, you're absolutely right, it's a management issue. So whether someone's at home or in a workplace, in terms of doing their work, a manager knows what the output is expected to be there and they would deal with that through their normal processes. So in terms of that. We also picked up May 23 improvement service work that was carried out around them producing a hybrid working policy for people to refer to. And again, there was information in that. And Improvement Services had also obtained information from whatever council shared in terms of what was taking place in their own councils around this. And we then got up-to-date information at the end of 24 from councils in terms of what was existing, because this has been a bit of a moving feast in terms of just people changing and adapting after the pandemic. And I would just reaffirm that we are not an outlier in terms of the proposals that we are making, and are not that adrift from what people are currently working. I think it is vitally important for us to have guidance in place. That's from an employee perspective, a manager perspective, from a trade union perspective. And for us as a council, as an organisation, We have made reference, and I'll not talk about any individual situations, but it has caused difficulties with us managing absence and us managing employee relations issues, which can be internal to the council, go to appeals in the council, and also can go externally to employment tribunals. So I think that's important to note, and it's better for an organisation to have something, whatever that may be, to rely upon. And I would also confirm that we have had discussions with all of the trade unions on this. Our partnership working arrangements in the council are very, very clear, and we do consultation and or negotiation with the trade unions. All of the trade unions are involved in that. They will have varying interests depending on the nature of the discussion and on the nature of their occupational groups in terms of who's affected by what is being proposed. They've all been fully engaged in this process. What I would say is Unison tended to have more people who are in the work style categories of working in an agile way, just because of the nature of what work groups join which trade unions, but they've also been fully engaged with. And then as a result of that engagement, our arrangements are that the trade unions negotiate with their members. What I would also say we do internally, and that is partnership working arrangements, is these matters are all discussed at the corporate management team and resource management teams, which cascade down to grade 5 managers in terms of these proposals. There's been lots of time for people to contribute, come up with alternatives, make suggestions, etc. Around all of this. So we've been very fulsome in our consultation with the trade unions, and I just wanted to reinforce that.
Okay, thanks very much. I think from my own point of view, I think I said I was keen to avoid entering into this sort of febrile debate about working from home, and I think too often we slipped into that. Let's just be clear, hybrid working, agile working is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. The issue here is that we have been asked to put in place some guidance that helps the local authority corporately manage agile working going forward and deals with all the kind of issues that have come forward. I think there's validity in all the issues that have come forward, but ultimately, when we've been asked to agree a position, we've got to try and reach some sort of balanced position. I think, for me, it's important to stress reasonableness and flexibility throughout. The suggestion that I'm going to make is that if I draw your attention to 6.6, it's proposed as part of the paper to conduct a review exercise 18 months following the introduction of Agile working guidance to give the Council the opportunity to review the arrangements and make any necessary adjustments to the Agile working approach as deemed necessary. I would like to give that more visibility. In particular, I would like to move the paper with an additional recommendation, and that recommendation is that a further report on implementation be brought to committee following that 18-month review period, so that we have councillors. This isn't a review that sits on the basis of those who are delegated to manage the council on our behalf. This is a report that comes back to councillors who ultimately have been asked to make a decision today. And I would suggest that after the implementation and that 18-month review period, that this comes back to councillors. The one thing that struck me in the kind of trade union contribution was that they want to be partners in developing a policy. Now, our personnel services are stating very clearly that we've engaged with them, but clearly there's a concern out there that I think we need to address. So my suggestion would be to move the paper with that additional recommendation, and that allows us a further opportunity for review. And if I could just make this point about the character and nature of the council and of the administration. We do work with our trade unions. We work with our trade unions to double paternity leave for the workforce. We work with our trade unions to deliver a frontline first fund to back frontline workers. We work with our trade unions to introduce that right to switch off after hours. We're working with our trade unions to narrow the gender pay gap and to deliver the best paid home care workforce in the country. So we'll keep working with our trade unions. We'll keep that under review and try to get the best outcome for our workers and for the people who rely on our services, because we are in a different environment and we've got to adapt to that different environment. And I think what we need is guidance that allows us the flexibility to do that. So I think there are two positions to bring forward. My proposal, if I have a seconder, is from Councillor Convery, is that we move those recommendations with that further recommendation that report and implementation be brought to committee following the 18-month review period. The amendment, when you're asked to vote shortly, will be from Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Johnson-Dempsey, which is that this is deferred to a future meeting. So you'll be asked, when I open the vote, to vote for either the motion or the amendment. Hang on a sec, I've got Councillor Clark wants to come in.
Thank you again, Chair. Just to clarify on the amendment, that it should include the words "with a view to seeking agreement."
Oh, noted. Noted. So those are, there's two positions. There's the motion and the amendment, and they will shortly appear on your screen. Sorry, Councillor Devlin. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to let you know Kathleen McCliments has lost her internet, and I've asked you to, if she can phone in and vote, if she can't get contact. Right, thanks.
Right,
just wanting to clarify. Thanks.
The difficulties associated with hybrid working, but I'll go. But okay, the vote will appear shortly.
Okay, as outlined by the Chair, that's the vote now open. The motion as proposed by Councillor Fagan, seconded by Councillor Convery, and the amendment proposed by Councillor Clark, seconded by Johnson-Dempsey. And I'll dash you, press your preference now. We're still waiting on 3 members voting.
Who are they?
One is Councillor McClimont. For members in the room, could you please ensure that you've entered the meeting just so that your vote counts? We're still waiting on 3 members to put their vote in. We're just waiting on 1 member now. Karen's going to address.
Is that Catherine?
No, 1 more also. If any member's vote's not registered, could you let me know? There's just 1 member still to vote. Motion. Right, that's, we've got all the votes in now, so I'll stop vote. We have 15 members who voted, sorry, we have 16 members who voted for the motion, including Councillor McClimont, and 10 members who have voted for the amendment, so the motion is declared carried. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to bring the meeting to a break just now. We've been going for 2 hours. There's still a lot to get through. I'm maybe going to suggest that we come back here in half an hour, and it gives people maybe time to get lunch. Is that problematic? I think, right, so there is the Risk and Audit Committee at 2. So there is a Risk and Audit Committee at 2. There is a substantial amount of business to get through, but I still think we should take half an hour just now. And if people are willing to cooperate with me, I'm going to try and get through the remaining business as quickly as I possibly can.
Exactly.
Right, would that be agreeable then to have a 10-minute break instead?
Could you go away for half an hour? And... Eh?
Right, 10 minutes and feel free to bring it back. But, sorry, Councillor Cooper.
Oh,
Hello?
Sorry. Ten minutes.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can. I'm saying I've just paused the meeting for
No,
10 minutes.
the problem is that when I was trying to vote, I couldn't get it to register, and I wanted to know if it had registered.
It has registered and your vote was counted. So you're
Right,
you've
that's fine.
counted. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're...
Still waiting on a few.
Okay, folks. I'm just going to check the microphone's working. I'm very aware of time and that there is another meeting in this room. Can I ask if the committee would be agreeable? Could I take item 6? These are the items for noting. Is the committee content to take items 16, 17, 18 and 19? They are items for noting. They are useful and interesting reports, but just given the time pressures, would the committee be content to note those en bloc at this stage? Can we agree that? So Councillor Ross.
Joe, there was only one wee question I wanted to ask on item 17, and it was to do with the intensive public consultation we had, which only resulted in 298 responses. I know there's a further stage envisaged. Are we going to find some other way to try and increase that response for 298? That was my only question. The rest I'm fine with.
I think if Councillor Ross is content, I'm happy to have housing and tech respond separately to, or indeed to put a response around all the committee members, if that would be agreeable, because otherwise I would just, when we come to that point, take the full report. But if you're content, can we get a commitment there that we'll take that, and there we go, Craig. I'm looking for Craig. Just circulate a response to the committee. Okay, thank you very much for that. That will help. Could I come to item 11 then, which is on homelessness temporary accommodation, and I'm going to ask Jacqueline Fernie, I think, is here to speak to that paper.
Yeah, thanks very much. So the report presents a proposal to increase temporary accommodation to meet increased homelessness demand. Section 2 sets out the recommendations that we're seeking approval to increase supply of temporary accommodation by making use of a vacant council property, the former Beckford Street Business Centre, which is a general services asset, and that funding to develop the unit is taken from existing homelessness budget provision. Section 3 of the report sets out the background to the proposal in terms of the surge in homelessness demand over the last 3 years, and the external drivers to that in terms of the impact coming out of the pandemic, cost of living increases and shrinkage of the private rented sector market, and notes that there's been regular reporting to Housing Committee since the Council declared a housing emergency last June. Moving on to section 3 of the report, it sets out some of the key statistics that just demonstrate the increased demand that we're working with. And then the report moves on to our approach to meeting temporary accommodation needs, which is through annual review of our temporary accommodation supply against demand, and our focus on self-contained furnished properties as a response to homelessness, so ordinary homes in our communities. And that's supplemented by our rapid access first stop accommodation, and that allows for a bit of time for assessment and planning for appropriate move on. Moving on, still in section 3, the annual review over the recent years has demonstrated the requirement for additional temporary accommodation, and that's despite the fact that we've increased our self-contained furnished properties by over 15%. And while that's been necessary to meet the demand for temporary accommodation, the downside of that is we're taking out stock that would otherwise be resolving homelessness and through to the mainstream pool. From 3.7 onward, the report covers the fact that those efforts to increase stock just hasn't fully mitigated the impact of increased demand, resulting in a requirement to utilise hotel accommodation, and that's at a significant cost above budget provision, but in order to meet the accommodation needs of folk that are presenting as roofless. And although that hotel use has been a last resort, we have relied on it over the last couple of years. And moving on through section 3, the table at 3.9 shows the costs involved and how they've increased year on year. And also through section 3 of the report, there's it's just demonstrating the risks involved in that cost, but also in terms of access, because we're just not reliant on accessing hotel accommodation. We've got particular problems when either of the two big cities have got a concert on. We've got the Commonwealth Games coming up next year, which we expect will cause us issues. And our increasing reliance on hotels has also led to problems where we've got several local hotels that won't accept bookings from our homeless service. 3.12 of the report moves on to covering those risks from a long-term position for us of full statutory compliance against our homeless responsibilities and the risk that's posed with the situation that we're in just now. Then section 4 of the report comes on to the proposal to address the shortfall in immediate access accommodation and minimise the risk associated with hotel use, that a council owned building has been identified for development as first stop accommodation. Again, it's a general services asset. It's been vacant for several years. It suffered from flood damage and requires a bit of investment to bring it back into use. But despite that, the structure of the building's intact, and 4.4 sets out that feasibility studies have indicated its suitability for temporary accommodation, and that's included consideration of the location, proximity to neighbouring properties, transport links, services, timescales and cost to deliver the project as temporary accommodation. Then 4.6 of the report moves on to setting out running costs and how they can be fully met between income collection and rent and existing homeless budget provision. And then section 4.9 is covering that if approved, the council would be looking to appoint a third sector management agent to deliver the service, and that would be via our standard procurement processes. 4.11 just covers the timescale, if approved, to deliver the project, and that would be 6 months. And moving on to section 5 sets out next steps, which again, if approved, property services would be given the go-ahead to progress to delivery. There's no direct employee implications as a result of these recommendations, and financial implications are set out in section 7. Again, just covering the cost to develop and how they can be fully funded through existing homelessness budget provision. And finally, section 9 covers other implications, which is really highlighting and things I've already covered around the risks to the council and how the project would be delivered, and coming back to the recommendations that I covered at section 2 of the report. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions, and could I come to Andrea Cowan?
Thanks, thanks Chair, thanks Jacqueline for the report. I'm delighted to see this initiative. Homelessness is really the scourge of society, in my opinion. I've always been passionate about housing and feel the need for everybody to have a safe, warm space to call home. And I'm delighted. I know that this isn't exactly a safe, warm space to call home, but it does help with our emergency housing. I've already had a briefing from Sharon Egan before she went off on holiday, and I know she's delighted that this is moving forward. Hopefully this new unit in Beckford Street, combined with the Social Bite initiative that's taking place in my ward in Rutherglen, will eliminate the use of bed and breakfast for the council in total. I know that in Beckford Street, the proposal is that we have 13 double bedrooms or double rooms and 2 family rooms. I would just ask, and I'm sure this will be taken into account, but I would just ask for an assurance that families will only be put into this type of setup when there's absolutely no alternative for them. It's even in a short period of time, it's not really, I don't think, the environment that you would want young children to be in. So as I say, basically that's it. I just want to welcome this and hope that it's a success. And as I say, just that reassurance around families, and I'd be more than happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jacqueline, could I come back to you?
course, yes, definitely. Our first stop is rapid access, quick turnaround, and families are prioritised for move on always. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much. Good luck with it.
Okay, thank you. Could I come to David Shearer?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this wholeheartedly. Anything that goes some way to assist with homelessness has to be welcomed. I'm going to ask a question that I think I know the answer to, but if you will indulge me. I'm assuming that anyone who is accommodated here will also be given assistance to deal with education issues, benefit issues, and any alcohol or drug issues. We would give them the full assistance that we would normally provide. Yes?
Okay, Jacqueline?
Yeah, absolutely. For every homeless application, we complete a support needs assessment, and that then informs a support plan for those who have support needs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Alec Allison?
Yeah, Chair, fully agree. This is a good paper. 2 or 3 issues though. I notice at recommendation 3, we're funding this through underspends in the current year, which isn't finished, and next year where a budget hasn't been agreed. And I'm just wondering how that can be called an underspend. Secondly, are we doing enough? You highlight in the paper that Lindsay House shut, I think it was in 22, where they had 13 first stops and 28 supported places. This hardly covers that. Yet we've got up to 140% increase in people accessing services. Are we not needing to do more? What happens, and again it highlights in the paper where we have failed on a small number of occasions. What happens to these people when we fail to house them? Are they just left out in the street? It's a curiosity. And 4.2, I seem to remember a planning application for that year, for that area, was all going to be redeveloped along with the building that's just been demolished. Is that not going ahead now? Or is this going to be a short-term measure?
Okay, I'll bring in Jacqueline, and then if there's anyone else that wants to come in and pick that up. But I would say that if I'm reading the paper correct, I think you have to remember this is first stop accommodation. As Councillor Cowan mentioned, there is the other facility that we're bringing on board in Rutherglen, which would deal with supported accommodation, and we're still managing lots of people in the community, but obviously there's enormous pressure on the service and it's put it under great strain. Jacqueline?
Sorry, the additional 30 units between the 2 new projects sit alongside the increase in temporary furnished properties, but also probably important to that is our efforts for throughput to be as speedy. So the majority of social lets across the council and RSLs are directed to homeless people. We're increasing our stock through new build, through buyback. So a big priority is resolving homelessness as quickly as we possibly can and minimising time in temporary accommodation. So I think those things combined and the 30 new units sitting alongside other increases in temp. And the funding, I don't know if Jackie would want to.
Yeah. You're right, we are anticipating underspends next year and the year after. That reflects the expenditure that we're currently making around homelessness. So we do have a confidence that if things are maintained, we will see that underspend. If something else changes, as it could anywhere, we'll revisit that position. But we are anticipating that that's the position on underspends over the next 2 years.
And regarding the, I'm sure there was a planning application went through for that area.
We're going to see if we can get an answer on that one, Alison.
Yeah, I'll look into that for you and come back to you on that one.
Okay. Should I bring the committee back to the recommendations then, and can I ask that we agree the report?
Agreed.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. Can I come now to item 12, which is on land and property transfers and disposals, and Jerry McParland is going to speak to this item. Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report, which is contained in pages 131 to 140 of the papers, is to advise the committee of the actions required in respect of land and property transactions. The background at section 3 outlines the process where details of land and property potentially suitable for redevelopment or disposal are circulated in the property bulletin. Any assets with competing interests are judged against council priorities, including the need for capital receipts prior to recommendations being made. In cases where there is a requirement to reallocate or declare property surplus as part of minor or adjoining sales or to facilitate a council project, these are not circulated in the property bulletin. However, the details are included in this report. Transactions are only included in the report after successful consultation with the holding resources and planning. Appendix A details properties which are already considered surplus to the operational requirements of the respective resources and have been circulated through the bulletin with no expressions of interest. In addition, in these cases, there are no current interest through community asset transfer, and as a result, the properties are currently liabilities of the council in terms of vacant property liabilities. It's proposed that these properties are marketed with an appropriate planning statement seeking offers at a closing date to remove the liability and, where possible, achieve capital receipts. The proposed disposal of these properties is not considered to be prejudging the outcome of the ongoing estate strategy review, as these properties are already vacant, operationally surplus, and have no current or prospective service delivery. Appendix B details negotiated transactions where the land requires to be declared surplus in order that property services can conclude negotiations for its disposal. The majority of the sales are adjoining homeowners whereas the subjects within the Larkhall Community Growth Area relate to a larger site which is approved by planning permission in principle for housing. Phases 1 and 2 of the Community Growth Area have already been developed by Persimmon Homes, and Phase 3 of the Community Growth Area, as shown delineated in the attached plan, includes lands in the council ownership which extends to approximately 12.5 acres and is expected to be immediately available for development, subject to obtaining detailed planning consent. A large part of the remainder of the land, which is Phase 4, is subject to a long lease and therefore not currently immediately available. In order to facilitate the future development of the remaining areas of the community growth area, infrastructure in the form of a new distributor road and roundabout is required, and Persimmon Homes already have an agreement over the area required to deliver the new roundabout at Lanark Road to the north and already own the land to the south for their previous development, which would connect the distributor road. As the access to the land in the council's ownership and the connection to the existing residential development to the south is controlled by Persimmon, it's proposed to enter into a conditional missive with Persimmon Homes to sell the land to the council's ownership, extending to approximately 12.5 acres for inclusion in housing development. As part of this agreement, Persimmon will design and deliver the necessary access infrastructure to unlock the entirety of the community growth area's remaining development areas, much of which is held under ownership of the council. The proposed agreement to sell the land within the Larkhall Community Growth Area will be subject to detailed site investigations to establish abnormal costs, and the outcome of negotiations will be subject of a future report to the Housing and Technical Resources Committee to seek authority for the terms and conditions of a sale. The risk of not entering an agreement with Persimmon Homes is that the remainder of the community growth area is jeopardised or significantly delayed, and this would result in a lack of development of the proposed housing, lack of capital receipt for the council, and potential development sterilisation of the remainder of the community growth area. I would therefore refer members to the recommendations held in paragraph 2 of the report and ask that the land detailed in Appendix A be declared surplus to the council requirements and transferred to the Corporate Land Bank for disposal, and the land detailed in Appendix B, which will be the subject of negotiated transactions, be declared surplus to council requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any questions, and can I come to Ross Clark?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the Larkhall section there in relation to Persimmon, from the way it's set out in the report, it seems as a necessary thing to facilitate that needed development. I suppose my question would be, and I think I assume the answer already, and I would assume this is already happening, but just to receive confirmation in terms of the roundabout and distributor road that traffic implications in the area will be fully considered within that, because I know there has been issues in that area in the past. Just to receive confirmation of that.
Yes, thanks for the question. Some of those items have already been considered in the master planning of the overall site, and that's the requirement for the road and the roundabout, and they will obviously be subject to a detailed consent by Persimmon going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, Robert Brown.
Chair, could I welcome the report, but could I ask 2 or 3 questions on the Appendix A, quite a number of which are in the Rotherham Cambuslang area. Quite a lot of these facilities have been hanging about, if I can put it that way, for an awfully long time. Could you give me any kind of clarity as to why that's been the case, why it's taken so long to dispose of them? Secondly, in terms of the Cathkin Library, the former Cathkin Library in particular, it's unlike the others as part of another building. It's upstairs. There was some talk of doing some work on that before disposal. Is that still being considered? You might need to maybe check on that separate, I don't know. And thirdly, given the fact that these premises are significantly, to a significant extent, are community halls and things of that kind, which have been redundant for a while, is there any potential, because I think it'll be difficult to sell quite a few of these, for getting them made known to community groups in the area? I guess some of that will have been done, but I'm not particularly aware of these having been put around to community groups as such.
Yes, thanks for the questions. In terms of the delays, effectively these have been in the process of the state strategy review, and we'll be looking at vacant property in the process, and there has been a delay in the sense that we didn't want to prejudice or prejudge the outcome, but the feeling now is that having assessed these properly, there are more liabilities and they have no interest, and they've already been through the process, so that's why we want to take it forward now. In terms of Cathkin Library, you're absolutely right. There has been ongoing issues with that building, and it's been made safe to a certain point. We have had interest in it in its existing form, although that will be tested by the marketing of it, and failing that, then we would have to go to a plan B of doing something to protect it. But as you say, it's a complicated building because we actually only own the upper floor, and there's interrelated. We're having discussions with the co-owners, and there is, I'd say, some interest there, but I'm not overly enthusiastic on it. And finally, in terms of the community asset transfer, absolutely correct. These have been promoted by our community engagement team previously, and there was interest in 1 or 2 of them, which has fallen away. But the market of it won't preclude a community group putting in a note of interest. And similarly, if we didn't get successful sales, we would continue to pursue that avenue.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. To come to Eileen Logan.
Thank you very much, Chair. Could I ask, community growth, and did I pick that up right? The roundabout, Lanark Road, etc. They wanted, Persimmons want land to make a roundabout for Lanark Road, and then you did say it would facilitate or help to facilitate future growth in the community growth area. Have I got that part right? Aye,
yes,
so it's not the Carluke one. No. I couldn't find Carluke, that's what threw me there.
No,
I was reading it and I'd read it at the weekend. I thought, where did that come from? I thought you'd actually said Carluke, so it is definitely Larkhall and Carluke at the minute.
Yes.
That's my answer, thank you.
Right, okay. Leslie MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair, and can I welcome this report, Jenny? Come as no great surprise to you that I'm going to speak on this. Delighted that things are progressing with Persimmon, as you know, and also, and probably more so, the former community centre at Montgomery Street. Now, I was in it a year ago, or a year and a half ago, and I know how bad it was then. Is there any particular reason why it's been left so long before it's come to here for disposal? Thank you.
Jerry?
Yeah, it's very similar to the one Councillor Brown raised. It's basically because we didn't want to prejudge or prejudice any outcome of the estate strategy review. So these were properties which we anticipated would be tail properties for it, but given the length of time that piece of work has to take, we feel that it's now, as you say, imperative that we offload these liabilities and if possible, bring them back into economic use.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any more questions. Are there any other questions? No. So can I bring us back to the recommendations? Can we agree the recommendations in the report?
Yeah.
We're agreed. Thank you very much. I'll now come to a paper on the Health and Care Staffing Scotland Act. I'm going to invite Liam Purdy to speak to this report. Liam.
Thanks very much, Chair, and good afternoon, Committee. The purpose of this report is to update the Executive Committee on the Health and Care Staffing Scotland Act 2019. In relation to the background of the report, that's at section 3, and you'll see that the implementation of this act was originally due for April 2020. However, due to COVID, it was deferred to April 2024. In relation to section 3.2, you'll see the requirements of the act, and there are now a number of legal requirements for any local authority or integration authority when they're commissioning the services of a third party to deliver care. In section 3.2, there are some examples of the requirements under the Act and the sections highlighted. Just to highlight a couple of them just for noting, section 3.1 of the Act, and it identifies that we have to namely provide safe and high quality services, and two, that we need to ensure that it's the best healthcare or the best outcomes that we can deliver for service users. Just to reiterate or just restate what that means that we mustn't accept a just good enough approach to commissioning of services for health and care. We actually must look at commissioning services that will provide the highest quality and the best outcome for our service users. In relation to section 7 and section 8, it might seem like common sense, but what they're actually highlighting is there is a requirement now that we need to ensure that the health and wellbeing of service users are at the centre of any commissioning service. And we also need to make sure that the staff that are employing actually have their well-being taken into account, but also training requirements are offered by any provider that we commission. In relation to 3.3, it just gives the scope of the services that are, or the range of services that are in scope, and they make sense. It's all services that actually deliver a care component that we commission. 3.4 onwards talks about the governance arrangements that we have, about the requirements now under the Act. And you'll see that every local authority now must produce an annual report, and there's a template that's been produced, which is Appendix 1, which every local authority must now complete and send to the Scottish Government, and the deadline for that is the 30th of June. That needs to be a public-facing document, hence it needs to come to a committee for committee approval and for the public to see how we commission our services. Section 4 just gives details of how the proposals and the approach that we adopt to discharge the duties. In relation to 4.6 within that, you'll see that's a summary of the Appendix 1, which shows how we've complied with those requirements by South Lanarkshire Council. 4.7 and onwards goes on about the governance arrangements we have in place, and we've got strong governance arrangements and reporting requirements if there are any risks with any service that we commission. The 4.9, just to re-emphasise that going forward, we'll make sure that all future tenders that we've got compliance and reference to the Act going forward. So every tender or commission services in the future will make reference to that as part of the tendering process. 4.13, just to state that this is the first year return that we've actually put in for this local authority and all local authorities. It's a very general report this year, but what will happen in future years, we're told, is that the Scottish Government and the Care Inspectorate will look at templates, but will actually look at numbers that we're commissioning as well as the actual staff complement. So this year's template will probably look different, or next year's template will look different from this year's. Just to refer members back to the recommendations at section 2, is to take note of the requirements and that we've complied with them as a council and as an IGIB, and also to approve the attachment at Appendix 1, which will go as the council response. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Liam. Can I ask if there are any questions in that report? I'm not seeing any questions, so can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. I'll come now to item 14, which is on the commissioning plan for services delivered by South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture, and I'm going to ask Alison Brown to speak to this paper. Alison.
Thank you. This report presents the commissioning plan for SLLC for the period 2025 to 27. In August 2024, our report was presented to the Performance and Review Scrutiny Forum, outlining the approach for future commissioning of leisure, culture and library services. This first plan covers the period 25 to 2027, with future iterations spanning a 5-year period to align with each new council plan. A draft of the commissioning plan was presented to this committee back in March for noting, and since then the plan has been shared with SLLC board and some minor refinements are now proposed. The first is in relation to the ownership of the plan. The plan is an agreement between the two parties, however, fundamentally it is a council document and therefore the title and some terminology has been updated to reflect this. The plan has also been updated to reflect the fact that SLC's operation also includes activity out with the ask of the council. The financial section of the plan has been updated to recognise that SLLC will be delivering the plan within the parameters of available resources. And finally, the plan has been updated to be clear of the role of SLLC's board in managing activities and the role of the council in monitoring how well SLLC is in responding to the council's ask. As such, a performance framework will now be developed and presented to a future executive committee for approval. Turning back to the recommendations, committee is asked to approve the commissioning plan for SLLC for the period 2025 to 27, approve that officers now undertake an exercise to review, update and streamline the legal documentation that underpins the relationship, and approve that officers develop a detailed performance framework for future approval by this committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Can I ask if there are any questions in this paper? Can I come to Maureen Devlin?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just so pleased to see this paper. It's been the work that's gone on in the background to get to this, to be able to come to this committee with it. I need to thank all the officers involved, and I also need to thank Joe Fagan as well, because of the work that he's put in, because of the importance of having the right thing for the Leisure Trust. I know it'll evolve as time goes on, but when you consider what it was like when we first came into this administration and the mess that had to get cleaned up, it's really, really good that this paper, we're now at that stage. So thanks to everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose I just want to put on record my thanks to Avril Osborne and the board at South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. Also, Kay Morrison, who has just left the South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture to take on a new role at Glasgow Life, and everyone in the council side who's helped to manage this process of developing our ask of South Lanarkshire Leisure and Culture. We brought that organisation through a very, very challenging time, and we're now in a place where we can actually look to how they build their business and grow their business and benefit from the investment that we're putting in place as a council. So can I draw us back to the recommendations? Can I ask, can we agree the recommendations? We're agreed. Thank you very much. And can I come now to our final item, which is item 15 on the Marmot Place programme for South Lanarkshire, and I'm going to ask Jen Kerr to speak to this report. Jen.
Hi, thank you. I'm Jen Kerr, the Community Engagement Manager at South Lanarkshire Council. The purpose of this report is to inform the Executive Committee of the progress made on the Marmot Place programme in the last 6 months and to approve the prioritisation and the next steps for the programme. Section 3 outlines the background of the Marmot Place programme, what it aims to achieve, and it reminds us of the 3 practical phases of the programme itself. Phase 1, which is the data and evidence analysis stage. Phase 2, the system analysis stage. And Phase 3, the recommendation and action planning stages. This report notes that we are currently in Phase 1 and commencing Phase 2 at this time. And it provides an update on our implementation and development ideas for the future. Section 4 reminds us of why we applied to participate in the programme as part of the Community Planning Partnership, recognising, though, that the Council is one of the key partners with the most resources to affect the social determinants of health that the Marmot programme aims to impact on. It outlines, Section 4 outlines what the CPP sought to achieve when applying to be a pilot area, that all partners would be using evidence to inform decisions, an alignment across all partners on the basis for which we make those decisions, and an understanding of the need to routinely embed a focus on prevention in all that we do across all of our policy areas. And during a time of financial constraint, we recognize that this provides a lot of additional kind of silent barriers to being able to do that and work in a preventative way. Section 5 of the plan outlines the data phase and progress that's been made in that part. We've been working on that phase since December, and we aim to continue that phase until the end of July. So since our launch in February, the program's been very quiet. Unless you're a data analyst, you've been very, very, very busy. We've been working as part of a local working group that was established, as well as a national working group on data. And the project nationally has published its first report in May 2025 that was authored by the Institute for Health Equity, the sort of world experts in the social determinants of health. This report has outlined that the whole program has faced significant data challenges when coming to Scotland to work with our data sets, including a requirement to adjust this sort of Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation, the SIMD, which is our measure of inequality that we work with most reliably to make decisions in our work. They recognise that the SIMD was not as comparable as it needed to be to compare it with some of the service output data that they are looking at across the 8 principles of Marmot. The report goes into a bit more detail about that, and then it ranks a lot of our outputs of services against the adjusted SIMD. But most importantly, the report highlights a bit of a new picture considering the council areas with the greatest imbalance between deprivation and overall population because of the way that they've reorganised it. The top 4 councils are basically bearing twice the burden of their own population in terms of inequality, which comes with associated costs. And there's suggestions in the report that perhaps inequity and the impact of deprivation is carrying a burden of cost associated with addressing the impacts of that, and that all councils aren't necessarily receiving their fair share of funding to support the levels of deprivation they have within their population. Locally, we've been very productive in our local data group, where we're working with the national one to really take the information that they're providing across inequality and really making that local. So looking where we can to get data as low as possible down to neighbourhood level, looking at some of the trends that they've raised to see locally if that makes sense. One of the issues we've always said with South Lanarkshire is our deprivation is hidden amongst lots of prosperity and deprivation. So sometimes it's hard. What looks like the middle of the chart, actually, when we look in a really close level, becomes a little bit more of a different story. So in doing so, we've already started to discuss, and I'll move on to section 6 now. We've already started to discuss how we might want to approach phase 2, which we're also starting to look at and plan ahead for. So section 6 talks about prioritisation. Within the leadership group, after looking at the first report, we recognise that there's quite a range of work and topics and lenses that we could focus on across the Marmot programme. But as a programme, it's a way of working. It's a programme where we're offered significant support from the world's experts and from Public Health Scotland and all of the resources behind them and the other pilot areas. And we think it would be best use of all of these resources if we focus them on one lens of work. The leadership group considered and discussed how to maximise what the council partners would learn from this time-limited project support. We have another sort of 14 to 16 months of the support available to us, and that we would learn how to create and apply the evidence base for prevention of health inequity. After considering the range of lenses, the group recommends that we focused on one thematic lens, which would be child poverty, and within that, early years in particular, and that we would integrate all of the 8 Marmot principles and identify any places to apply the Marmot approach around those lenses where evidence suggested that we should. However, we would caveat that recommendation with that the partnership would also consider future application and additional applications of the Marmot approach across other themes and places where priorities arrives through the evidence. However, we would do this after we completed the supported pilot timeframe. The group chose early years and child poverty because we have a strong child poverty partnership and a significant amount of information and capacity within those services. Furthermore, early years offers us a long-term and effective early intervention and prevention possibility because of the age of the group and the lifelong aspects of it. We all agree, though, that all work, while very good in building on a strong foundation, would benefit from further alignment into policy areas, robust scrutiny of the existing evidence we use, alignment and coordination of the evidence, the introduction of new evidence, and a series of fresh lenses applied to the work through the 8 Marmot principles, and a lot more discussion space to decide if we should consider changing and transforming some of the ways we work and some of the way we join up resources around child poverty and early years. So section 7 outlines a little bit more information about phase 2 and that what we would want to do in phase 2 is then apply that very specialised pieces of work. So we'd want to apply the evidence specifically to child poverty in early years in phase 2 only, and identify where prevention approaches would bring an improvement of outcomes for the residents of South Lanarkshire and their families, and provide us with some space to look at reforming our services with our partners. Throughout phase 2, the Institute for Health Equity will support our partnership by hosting partnership workshops and also stakeholder workshops where we'd bring other stakeholders back in. So while we've been quiet during the data phase, we recognise the need that it's not just the council or just the health board involved in this. We need to involve people, communities, businesses and others as well, other stakeholders. And at the end of the evidence phase and before we start phase 2, we would hold a series of stakeholder workshops aimed around the places in the evidence and what it said, not only just to verify that it's accurate with people that live and experience this information, but to see if there's anything we missed and if we've got the story accurate before we embark on action planning and looking at what it is we need to do next. Section 8 outlines the next steps of the programme and include a second national report from the Institute for Health Equity, and that's expected around the end of summer. They're aiming for July. This will delve further into each of the 8 Marmot principles as they apply across Scotland and also in the 3 pilot areas. So there'll be more specific information about South Lanarkshire. That will also coincide with the end of our local data work. So by the time we get to the end of the summer, we do expect to have a decent understanding of inequality, how it's impacting on health, and how it's impacting on our services as well. Future reports and updates will be brought before the Executive Committee at key milestones of the programme, and we note, though, that the programme will continue to be delivered in partnership through the Community Planning Partnership. So in summary, we are progressing through the Marmot Place programme in the anticipated timescales. We are learning a significant amount of information already, and it's already asking us probably more questions than answers, but we will move into the answers phases after the summer and in the autumn. I'd like to draw your attention back to the recommendations in section 2 that in order to move the partnership along on this journey, that the executive commits the council's resources and work to approve the recommended prioritisation of the programme on child poverty and family support in the early years, and note and approve the council's role in the planned next steps delivered through the Community Planning Partnership. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jen. Can I ask if there are any questions, and can I come to Margaret Walker?
Thanks, Chair. Just thank you for the report. It's really useful to get an update. It's just to say, and Liam, please jump in if I'm talking rubbish. We talked about this in relation to the primary care improvement plan at the recent integrated joint board meeting, and that was exactly one of the issues with the information. It wasn't broken down. It was based on system activity rather than, prevalence rates, and also breaking it down into, for example, localities or even GP clusters. And I think Suman had said we were going to be looking to, access more of that more specific information. So I don't know if there's kind of any, link up there, because it's obviously very similar, because that would help enormously. It still means at the end of the day, though, you'll probably have to make some difficult decisions financially in terms of using that information meaningfully and shifting resources about. But thank you, and thanks for the report.
Okay, Jen, do you want to pick that up?
Sure, thank you. Good question. One of the already quick wins from being involved in the Marmot process, in addition to the national profile that's receiving now, because we've all kind of known that for quite a long time and struggled with that at a local level. So that will now hopefully be a national issue getting addressed, is that actually within our own working group, we are working together across agencies to also look at that problem. So the data group is we've always collaborated when we've had a piece of work, a plan or a policy in a themed area, but now to do it across all areas together at once has been a really great discussion and a good collaboration, and we're learning a lot from that. So it's not a topic that will go away. So we now have, led by our senior public health consultant, Carol Stewart, we will now continue to work with the NHS to improve that type of the type of information available to us. Now we've recognised how useful it could be.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I come to Andrea Cowan?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jen. Really full report, lots and lots of information to take in there. I'm a big fan of the Marmot plan. I've read a lot about it, and I'm glad that the council's taken this on. It's a huge project, and you did say yourself that at the moment there are more questions than answers. So what I would like to, I know it's going to come back to executive regularly, but I feel personally that there is such a lot of data and that we're going to generate so many answers that this is maybe something that should be included in councillor briefings between executive committees, just so that we all have a full understanding, because it goes right across every service that we offer. And I just think that that would be beneficial so that we fully understand the implications and the data that's been gathered and the answers that come from that. Thank you.
Okay, I think if we take away and think about how we brief that, 'cause I'm conscious there would be an enormous volume of data, but could I suggest maybe as a first step, could we circulate that first report? It might have been circulated to members of the executive committee, but could we, I see as a first step, could we circulate that report to all councillors? It will not provide the level of detail, I think, that we're talking about as yet, but it's maybe that first step, and we can have a think about how we present it to councillors and those, you know, in between those sort of milestones. Okay, can I come to David Shearer?
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this report and this programme going forward. I do hope that the commitment to dig down into the data is genuine, because in places like Clydesdale, we all too often, from 30,000 feet, we are a green leafy paradise. But when you come right down to it, you have market towns that are doing fine, and within a few miles, you have ex-mining villages that are really, really struggling. So that 30,000 feet view never picks up the needs that are scattered in amongst the rural parts of Clydesdale. And I hope that by digging deeper, we will find ways to resolve some of these issues. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll maybe come back to Jen on that, 'cause I think we do have some examples from say East Kilbride where we know some of this from data pre-Marmot. Jen, is there anything you want to pick up there?
Yeah, I think that part of the digging deep is the comparing and contrasting with other types of information we wouldn't have looked at before. And then it brings up a question going, well, that doesn't add up. Let's go look there a little bit further. We do know quite a bit of where those areas are just from our practice. We're all on the ground and we're working in those areas already. But bringing it together in a consistent story, I think it's really important that the data is accessible to every single person that works in every one of those communities, including yourselves. So that's the point of the workshops that will start in the autumn with stakeholders. We expect to have anyone who's interested in participating in those participate, because it's one thing for what the numbers can tell us, but those numbers are people's lives and their places that people live in. So we think we'll probably organise them around a place and say, here's what it's saying about your place. Is that accurate? Is that true? And definitely rurality is a really difficult place to look at information across country as a known issue. And there's a working group on that as well nationally. So we will be contributing to that, I hope. In East Kilbride example, we're again from 30,000 feet. It looks pretty rosy. It looks pretty well off. Actually, we just by looking at different types of data found significant amounts of child poverty a year and a half, 2 years ago when we started doing our neighbourhood planning work in the area. We noticed that actually most of our families are in work, but they're in work poverty and they're really struggling. And it's where we started looking at food bank data and bringing other types of data into the picture, like in-work universal credit claimants, and realizing that those are the families that are exponentially using the food bank in East Kilbride, which continues. Food bank usage is dropping across South Lanarkshire, East Kilbride. It's still rising, and that rises families. It's got a drop in single-parent households, but it's still families using it. So when we start to put all the stuff together that we wouldn't have looked at jointly, we start to see a bit of a different picture, and then we can go to that food bank and say, okay, where are they coming from? What area? And it is really that hard to get that kind of local data. So it's really important that what IHE are doing is helping us define that and search for areas. And we're not surprised by what's coming up, but I think it's actually more local in some cases than we realised.
Okay, thank you very much. And there are no more questions. So can I just say, obviously, I totally endorse the recommendations in the report, not just the chair of the committee, but the chair of the Community Planning Partnership. And I think we are fortunate to have a number of partners, particularly but not exclusively the NHS, who are not just bought into this work, but are showing that curiosity about it that's really coming through from the discussion today. Can I bring us back to the recommendations and can I ask us to agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
We're agreed. There are no items of urgent business, as you'll recall, so I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you, everybody.